Good evening, everyone. The time is 5 p.m. and the Finance Committee will be starting in a moment. Hey, how you doing, sir? Top of the morning to you too. Thank you.
That's the best I had to sign language right
I got sign language for you.
there. Here we go.
You want me to turn this up for you?
Did I do that to you?
Yes.
Thank you. Ooh, he got the stamp right.
So was that Providence, that Irving? Thank you.
Good evening. The time is 5 p.m. The Warwick Finance Committee is open. May I have a acceptance of the minutes for the meeting held? There are no minutes, correction.
Close.
Without objection, I'd like to address PCR 58-24, resolution relative to issuing correction. I would like to address PCR 5524, formally bid 2024-341, traffic safety cameras. Without objection? Thank you. So the first item on the docket today through the committee is going to be PCR 55-24, traffic safety cameras. Good evening, Major. Please identify.
Good evening, Major Andy Sullivan for the Police Department.
Thank you, Major.
The Police Department solicited requests for proposal for an automated traffic safety camera program. The proposals sought were for a turnkey automated school zone speed and red light camera program. The city received proposals from the following 4 vendors: Ultimate of Lanham, Maryland; Conduent, State and Local Solutions of Washington, D.C.; Genoptic Smart Mobility Solutions of Jupiter, Florida; Novoa Global of Orlando, Florida. After a review of the 4 proposals, the police department is requesting to enter into an agreement with Ultimate Incorporated, as their proposal was ranked the highest by our 4-member review panel. If the final agreement is reached with Ultimate, the initial term would be for 5 years with an option for renewal thereafter. At this point, if it's okay with the committee, I'd like to turn this over to Colonel Connor for some remarks, and then we can go back into questioning, if that's...
Absolutely, Major. Thank you.
Sir.
Colonel Connor, when you step to the microphone, please just identify.
Good evening, Colonel Brad Connor, Warwick Police Department. I'd just like to provide a little bit of context or a little bit of background in regards to this project. I had been in conversation with Mayor Picozzi and his administration dating back to 2021 when I took over as the police chief. One of the primary concerns that we have in the public safety space was traffic and accidents and the numerous complaints that we receive into the police department on a daily basis. This is nothing new. This has been going on for decades. But as we all know, Warwick is a very busy city. It's growing every day, and we have numerous motorists on the road. And, quite frankly, we need to do something to make our roads safer. We outlined a comprehensive plan dating back several years, which included adding technology. We've been able to use city money to allow our officers and our motorcycle cops to have high-speed equipment in the vehicles that could allow them to write tickets quicker. We've brought in better radar and LiDAR systems to be able to measure speed. And we've also spent a lot of money on traffic signs and traffic trailers to notify motorists of how fast they are going. I was fortunate enough to attend the International Association of Chiefs of Police conference in end of 2022, where I was able to meet with several vendors and discuss the automatic traffic cameras that we're talking about tonight. It's important to be able to use technology as technology advances in order to leverage that technology to benefit public safety. Again, I was able to attend another conference. This is one we were awarded our national accreditation, where I got to be involved with several discussions and panel talks on how agencies throughout the country are using technology to fight crime and to help with the traffic concerns. One of the things that they are doing in many cities and towns, as we've seen in Rhode Island, is utilizing these traffic cameras specifically in school zones and also at red lights in order to calm traffic, to let the community know that we care about public safety and that we want to invest in the safety of our kids in our school zones, and also try to reduce calm to prevent accidents. I believe in using technology for several reasons. One, the bad guys are doing it, so why shouldn't we? If motorists are out there using Facebook, Instagram, checking their emails, watching TV, and text messaging while they drive, why can't we use technology in order to correct their actions and improve their behavior? We did a little study, very non-scientific, but what I did was I asked our traffic officers to give me some numbers, and I found that we average about 8,600 traffic tickets per year. Of those, only 821 in 2022 and only 759 in 2023 were actual red light tickets. So we're writing under 1,000 red light tickets in the entire city per year with our current staffing. Then what I did was I asked our traffic unit to go out in an undercover capacity and monitor 5 specific intersections in the city of Warwick for 1 hour. And without taking enforcement, see how many tickets, how many traffic violations, red light violations occurred in that 1 hour period. When we averaged them out, we came out to 12.5 per hour per intersection. When you add that out very conservatively, and you say that that average would only be 8 hours a day, you're looking at 182,500 violations a year for just those 5 intersections. So that just tells you how many violations are occurring on a day-to-day basis. I live in Warwick, I work in Warwick, I spend most of my time in Warwick, and when I drive around, almost every time I see a violation. I know you folks do because I hear it. We get it into our department through the council liaison quite frequently of all the traffic concerns that are happening. And most importantly, I hear it from Mayor Picozzi because every Monday morning he wants to know how many tickets we wrote, where we're writing, and what we're doing about the traffic control. So there is an issue. So I come to you again in the space of public safety. I'm not a budget balancer. That's not my area of concern. I care about the safety of the people and the residents and the students in Warwick. We have a problem. We know we have a problem, and this is part of the solution. My officers that go out there, we all know the retention and recruitment issues that we're dealing with. Every day, there is just the minimum numbers of officers on the street. There used to be 1, 2, sometimes 3 extra police officers just by scheduling out there in order to do these extra traffic patrols. But they're not there now because we just don't have the manpower. So if we can utilize this in order to calm traffic a little bit, I think we'll all be in a better place. I'm sure we'll have much more discussion on the topic, specifically the implementation, but I'll touch on a couple things. One, everybody is going to know where these cameras are going to go. We're going to let everybody know. We're going to tell them it's going to be advertised. It'll be on social media. It'll be on the news. It'll be on the website. Then we're going to have an implementation phase where everybody's going to have 30 days to get a warning. And then we're going to put copious amounts of signs up. I just drove down Blackstone Boulevard in Providence the other day, and I was anxiously awaiting to find where that traffic camera was because I passed about 4 or 5 signs. And of course, my wife is driving 20 miles an hour because we were afraid to get a ticket. And that's exactly the purpose of these. Everybody's going to know that these cameras exist. And then if you get a ticket and you're a Warwick resident, all right, you got your ticket. All right, and now you should know better because you know where they are and you live in the city and you've gotten the warnings. But for all this, probably up to 70 to 80% of the motorists, judging by other cities and towns and what they give out, it's probably going to be the commuters, the people that come to Warwick to use the hotels, to use the airport, to use our restaurants. And those are the people that may be speeding through your communities or going through your red lights. And I don't care about those folks. And I don't care anybody in this room. My wife got a ticket. We paid it. It was in East Providence. She didn't know. I looked at the ticket, and it's funny how you can look at it, and yep, that's it. That's you. So you pay the $50, and the next time you drive slower, and that's the purpose of this system. So I respectfully request that you consider this. I believe it's important. It's a very good public safety tool. And from what we know about the system, from talking to other chiefs of police, you're going to see a dramatic spike, and then it's going to come down and it's going to plateau. But what also happens is the number of accidents is supposed to go down as well, and the number of traffic-related other types of tickets and incidents are going to go down as well. So I would take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Colonel. So there was an article in the newspaper that said over the last year that motor vehicle accidents have increased by 10%.
Yes, especially when you look at, before the COVID years and then past COVID, yeah, they've gone up dramatically. It wasn't just city vehicles, as the article may have suggested. We all kind of, our hearts skipped a beat, but it was, but certainly, yeah, accidents are going up, and tickets as well. So we know that the problems are out there.
Well, I want to say that, I've done mine a couple of years ago. I remember Councilman Ricks brought up something about traffic cameras, speed cameras, and I remember thinking to myself, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to do that. You know who changed my mind? My constituents, my neighbors. They constantly are reporting, rightfully so, especially Strawberry Fields, and that's near, as you know, an elementary school. They are constantly calling about cars exceeding down that road, flying down that road, especially at school time. I actually had a phone call from one of the crossing guards about the concern crossing the street, and this car went around them into the breakdown lane to avoid while she was in the middle crossing. It's been a constant, and when the mayor said that the number one concern or the number one phone call he gets in constituent affairs is traffic, that wasn't an exaggeration. That's one of the top phone calls I get as well, is between Sandy Lane, even State Street still call us, but Strawberry Field is one of the big ones near the elementary school. Sandy Lane, Warwick Avenue, obviously Airport Road to State Street, but also a lot of the streets in between, the long stretches that we have that go parallel to the airport. Those seem to be wide open. And if the constituents had their way, they would have a stop sign at every corner. And I know that also I've requested numerous traffic studies. So any small thing we can do, especially around the schools, I think would be nothing but a great benefit. And it's something that I looked at and something that now I feel I can support due to the urgency. And I don't know of any parents that have students in school. Not one, for the record, not one has called me against this. So thank you, Colonel. Councilman Foley, I saw you. You wish to defer to the president?
I'll defer.
Okay. Council President, they would like to hear your comments.
Sure. Good evening, Colonel. Colonel, can you break down the fees? That's what's going to get the headlines here. So can we talk about how much the bill would be? How much is the processing fees? How much is the net going to be, et cetera?
I'm going to turn it over to the major for that.
Thank you.
Major Andy Sullivan again for the police department. Oops, excuse me. So these automated cameras had enabling legislation at the state level. Now let's just do a little history here. So the automated school zone speed cameras were enacted in 2016, the enabling legislation, and the red light citation cameras were 2005, so they predated that by quite a few years. So the breakdown of the fees would be: the red light speed zone cameras are set at $50 per violation. Speed cameras are $50 a violation. And an example of that would be a $7.80 processing fee, with the net proceeds to be collected per fine $42.20. The ultimate projects a collection fee of 70%, which I believe is a very, very fair number and possibly even underestimated. And then moving on to the red light enforcement, it's $7.80 per citation also. Collections fee of $10 per violation if it were to go to collections. The fine itself is $85. And so that leaves a net proceeds of $77.20. Based on their 70-cent projection rate, a red light camera would need to have 26 fines per month would 38 a month for the 70% ratio. Based on 100% collection rate, it would be 26 a month. These, the way it works is they get a citation in the mail. There's a barcode you can scan. You can log right onto the a payment portal if you wish and pay by credit card. If you're old fashioned, there's going to be a kiosk at City Hall. That's our plan. And they can hand deliver payments instead of for those who are not computer inclined.
Thank you, Major. So to recap, so for the school zones, a $50 state of Rhode Island fine, $7.80 for a processing fee. The city would net $42.20. And then on the automated red light enforcement, $85 state of Rhode Island fine, $7.80 processing fee, collection fine. The net would be $77.20. Do we know how many cameras we're looking at? What's the process of that? How's the police department going to decide where they go?
Yeah, so at this point, we would, if approved, we would enter into a final agreement with Ultimate, and that would be part of the process, doing a study, similar to a traffic study, to see where these cameras should be situated, where the best spots are, based on a variety of factors, such as the traffic studies, accident rates, and so on and so forth.
The Warwick Police Department will have say in that because you know where
Absolutely. Ultimate will leave it up to us for the final say of where these cameras are.
Okay. But do we have a ballpark of how many? That's the question I've been asked. How many cameras are there going to be? And I said, I knew we had to do a study and et cetera. But is there a ballpark figure that we're thinking? Are we going to start off? Does a contract call for X amount and then you can move up or down? Or is there a minimum that we would need to purchase?
No, no, sir. At this point, there's no minimum or maximum for cameras. It's really based on the situation, some of these intersections, how many we have. I can tell you we have countless red light intersections in the city of Warwick, which I can think off the top of my head, that would be more than ideal for the cameras. School zones also, we have 20 some odd schools, and most, if not all, would be applicable also. This does include private schools also. The term for schools is loosely defined according to the Rhode Island general law, and it's any area within a quarter of a mile where the school is that the cameras could be fixed.
So like a preschool or a Catholic school could be included as well?
Yes, sir.
Do we need to get any permissions if you put something up on a state road? The council mentioned he gets a lot of calls on state roads. Is there a process we'd have to go through for the state to get a check and to say permission to put something up?
Yes. So the Ultimate would ultimately have to go through permitting process, and that would require going through the state for any signs or cameras that would be fixed on state property or roadways.
So that could take some time as well when we're trying to get up and moving.
It can, yes.
If this was
The
going to
good
go.
thing is the cameras have been here for a while in Rhode Island with multiple communities already using them, so it's not an entirely new concept. So hopefully this is it'll be a little more expedited.
And the colonel mentioned signage leading up to where the traffic cameras are going to be. Do we know about how many? Is it, two heads up, a heads up, one sign, 5 signs? Do we know? Is it the same for each light, or is this all to be determined?
4 for schools and 1 for the red lights.
Okay, so 4 for schools and 1 for the red lights. And I had a final question, and I'm blanking. I apologize. Yeah, I apologize. I blanked on the last question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Major.
Thank you.
Let us know, Mr. President. We'll go right back to you. One quick question before I pass on to Councilman Foley, Major. So the way that this works is it's not just a click and a send from the company. Actually, it's reviewed by the traffic division, correct? The Warwick Police Traffic Division. Every single violation, I'll use that word with quotation marks, is reviewed before the violation is submitted.
Yes, so on the company's end, they'll use computer software to first conduct reviews. Then they have a human review it, and then they send it to us. In the final review, again, per Rhode Island law, enabling legislation requires that a sworn officer review the final, be the final reviewer of the violation before it's submitted.
And there will be a human contact within the department for the public to reach out to with any questions. There will be an actual designee from your department in uniform, a Warwick police officer designated to handle this, any calls or concerns.
Yes,
from.
sir. If not one, probably multiple.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Councilman Foley.
Thank you. First, anecdotal, like you, Colonel, every now and then I drive from Governor Francis to Main Street Coffee in East Greenwich. I go through various traffic lights. Every time I travel that route, at least 3 different people, vehicles, not close, but they blow through traffic lights. We're so fortunate that we don't have more deadly accidents. That was the anecdotal part. Secondly, right after, I think late last year, early this year, we were told that this proposal would be coming to us, and I reached out to the Colonel. I asked him questions. He had the answers I wanted. But then I did a further follow-up. As I've mentioned numerous times, my brother is the chief of police in Williston, Vermont. Matter of fact, recently, our colonel and my brother met at one of these conferences. And I asked my brother the same type of questions. I've got the same type of answers. That this is the technology that we need to make our streets safer. And that's my prime objective, because just like Councilman Howell, just like the mayor, 90%, 95% of the calls I get are traffic, speeding within the neighborhoods, on the main roads. It's amazing. My last question, or my only question, is you talked about scientific. I know East Providence has these. Am I correct?
Yes.
So you mentioned how you believe there'll be a peak and then it'll come down. Has that what East Providence has seen?
Yes, all these departments that implement the automated cameras, I do notice is an obvious spike after the warning period or during the initial violation phase of the cameras, and then eventually it plateaus, as the Colonel mentioned.
And the last point I want to make, like the Colonel's wife, I go to Pawtucket every now and then. That's my hometown. And I meet friends for breakfast, and I travel through Pawtucket. I had 2 speeding tickets around school zones. Full disclosure. 2 different schools, but from then on, I'm aware. I look for them. I know where schools are in Pawtucket because I grew up there, and I'm looking for those speed cameras. When I go into Providence, same thing. I'm looking for those speed cameras. It has an effect on my behavior, and as you have already testified, it has the effect on everybody. You get whacked in the wallet, there's a consequence for you violating the law. Let's be clear about that. That's why you're getting these citations. It isn't random. You have violated the law and you're getting these citations. It changes your behavior. I'm done. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Gebhardt.
Great. Thanks, Major. Thanks, Colonel. Let me go through it. I just have a couple of questions. Start with So we talked about that non-scientific study of red lights, and I think we've all seen folks blowing through red lights. Based on what any of these companies have told you or other departments have told you, do you have an expectation for the breakdown that we'll see in terms of violations? You know, it'll be 50% will be red lights, 50% will be the speeding, or, you know, do you expect one to be the lion's share of the violations we see, or the other way?
Yes, this all depends truly based on how many cameras are at, in the speed zone for that purpose and how many are at red lights for that purpose. And also the other factor to take into account is the school 180 school day calendar. That's when these cameras are able to be activated, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. They're not allowed to be on any other times or on weekends or during summer when school's not in session.
Okay, got it. So likely the red light cameras probably will be higher density. They can operate 24/7, 365, and we'll probably see more activity from those, if we had to guess. Okay, got it. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned, I think Carl mentioned school zones being a quarter mile from a school building, or what could be called the school building, a daycare or a private school or a public school. That's accurate?
That's what the enabling legislation provides for, and they define as a school zone any radius within a quarter of a mile. The good example brought up earlier is Strawberry Field Road, where the school itself is on, I believe it's Almy. So that school itself, during pickup, drop off, and even during school hours, may be very pedestrian and slow. However, the threat may lie on Strawberry Field Road, where you have kids walking to and from school, where the traffic has no other reason to otherwise slow down. It's not heavy traffic necessarily. So there's more apt opportunity for speeding and more danger.
And just like practically, so I'm thinking about like Cedar Hill School, which is at the intersection of Love Lane and Coesit Road. So you basically like put a, protractor at the middle of Cedar Hill and draw a quarter mile around that, and then any roadways in that circle are eligible, or how?
Yes, sir. They would certainly be eligible. Doesn't mean there would be one at every street within the quarter mile radius. It would be what would have the greatest positive impact on safety. So putting one on Red Chimney in that example probably would not be advisable. Wouldn't be useful.
Because there's a fee monthly, essentially, is kind of the commercials from whatever vendor we select. We pay some enabling fee monthly per device. So
yes, for their camera infrastructure and their equipment and the software updates and so on and so forth, regular maintenance that the city will have no responsibility for. Will be the vendor.
Right. So any location where we located one, we have to generate essentially the minimum just to cover the cost, and then after that we're on a cost sharing.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of effort and thought put into the locations. And in speaking with the vendor that we've chosen today, if that goes through, they actually hire a third party, a vendor, to come in and actually do this study. So they don't want to come in and say, listen, we're going to throw these things up everywhere so we can make more money. That's not the idea here. And, we have the final say as the police department, and certainly, we can work with the council members to talk about specific areas. But yeah, we want to put a lot of thought and effort into where they're going to be placed. And again, it's to get traffic calmed in that area. In the areas we need them. So if there's a school zone that, the kids just aren't, anywhere near the road at any given point, then we're going to elect not to put a speed camera there. I think that's important. And, to get to your point as, what's going to generate more tickets, I would say likely it's going to be the red lights, because, we're going to put those in areas that are highly densely populated and tons of retail and, commercial activity. And, the ones that we have the biggest problem with, we all think of Poston Airport, right? Bald Hill Road probably has 4 or 5 of them. And those areas generate tons of traffic and tons of violations.
Okay. Thank you. Talk to me a little bit about, like, practically, I'm still thinking of Cedar Hill, and you've got Love Lane and Coesit Road there. And so practically, if we decided, okay, there's one on Love Lane and one on Coesit, like how do these get installed? They go into the city easement, and would they be in someone's front yard or on the sidewalk, or do they get mounted to a pole? Like what actually happens?
The easiest way would be if it was city land, because that would make it a little more streamlined as far as permitting and location access. If we have to put it on state property or for a state road, then that would we still have to go through a permitting process, but it may take a little longer than had we gone through our own property, our own city land.
Yeah, we're also going to have the pole-mounted cameras instead of, I know you've seen some in Providence. I think they look like a mailbox.
Yep.
It doesn't appear that we're going to use those types. So the ones will be smaller cameras that'll be mounted to poles.
Okay.
And obviously existing poles are easier. We just need permission from the owner.
Got it. And these are powered, these cameras, so they'll take a electric feed from the pole itself, or they'll need a new service.
I believe.
They're not solar. They're not solar, right?
No, so that's the easiest way that they would be done, is mounted to a existing telephone pole where they can tap into the power on that pole. They would need permission from that pole owner, whether it's Verizon or Rhode Island Energy, National Grid, whoever it is, and then they could fix it to that pole.
Okay. All right. So the primary pushback I've had from at least folks in my area on this is around privacy. So I just have a couple questions on, it's the same kind of questions we got around Flock. So is there any tie between Flock and this camera system in any way?
There is not.
And thank you. And is there any tie between our camera system here and any other camera systems in other jurisdictions or
For the traffic camera, no, there would not be. All rec is another factor is any rec is acted upon will be destroyed in 90 days. That's another part of the law. So they're not retaining vehicle data for an extended unreasonable amount of time.
Okay. And the only infractions that can be issued based on collected data are limited to going through a red light or speeding in a school zone? Like, can other infractions be enforced based on data from the cameras?
No, the only exception would be, and the law provides for that also, if an officer, say, is following a vehicle they suspect of intoxicated operator, for example, the officer will observe violations such as leaving lane of travel, going through a red light. Once they act upon that and make an arrest, or maybe conclude that the driver is not intoxicated and just issue citations, the officer issued citations will overrule the automated camera citations. So we will then delete those or not issue them too, essentially.
So the red light camera data could be used as additional evidence in an investigation. Is that what you just said?
I suppose it could be, but we're not finding them. Basically, if an officer observes a violation at a red light, their observations and their summons is going to prevail over the automated process.
Okay. How am I doing on time? Oh, I got a minute. Let's see. Any data on? I'm going to shift gears again. You mentioned decrease in accidents. Has anyone codified that into some statistics in terms of what the impact of these is on overall safety?
I don't have stats in front of me on that, but I did talk to personnel from East Providence the end of last week, and they did say there was a dramatic, a noted improvement on driver behavior and reduced accidents.
All right, got it. Have any municipalities or cities or towns run into issues with increased cut-through traffic? You know, people avoiding certain areas and going through neighborhoods or anything like that as just an unintended consequence?
Did not ask that specifically. Again, from my contact with East Providence, people, but they did not bring that up when I asked them an open-ended question. Is there any other issues that you may have encountered while implementing the program or continuing the program? And they noted none.
Okay. And then I guess the last question. So if a city vehicle were to be flagged by one of these, who's going to pay that citation?
Colonel's going to pick it up. We'd certainly handle that in our way. Again, these vehicles, if they go in priority, that's obviously an excused
Okay.
exception.
I'm good for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to request an extended time?
No, I'm good.
Thank you, Councilman. Council President, did you have a follow-up? Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the council? Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. Many of my questions were already answered, but I suppose I have a couple more questions. So there would be a collaborative process if this is approved with the decision as to exactly where to place the speed and the red light cameras. So exactly what would that look like in terms of, say, would it start with a traffic study or?
Yes, so this third-party entity that the colonel had mentioned is kind of a blind way of doing it, where there's no influence either from us or from Ultimate. I mean, we can certainly, the colonel and I have many years combined here in the city of Warwick, and we could drive you out to the hotspots right now. But certainly the company will come in, the third party, and have an objective interpretation on where to put these, where they may be best suited. It may open our eyes to why a particular site we think is good may not be good.
Part of that would be the interview process with our traffic division. We can also provide intel from our intelligence officer, software mapping of where the accidents are occurring. So they will have an idea, but based on what we give them of where the hot spots are in our primary areas of concern. And then they'll do their own scientific study and then bring it back to us for final approval.
Yeah, that sounds very good. I understand that a traffic study is its own very involved process. And yeah, with this vendor, they would be collecting some decent fees. So seems fair that they would have to do a substantial amount of that initial work as well. Yeah, the fee structure, it sounds like you spoke with a number of different potential vendors. And did any of those other vendors have a fee structure that appeared to be more advantageous to the city?
So that was certainly one of the factors, but it wasn't the only factor. So looking at the what the company brings to the table and their reputation in our internal grading process that we did at the station, Ultimate is right there with, I think one or two had maybe approximately the same fee structure, and one or two was significantly more, maybe double the processing fees, and had some other things in there too. Yeah, some of them had LPR technology, license plate reader technology. We didn't want to delve into intermingling with any of that technology because that's not the purpose of this.
Thank you. That's very good to hear and does address some of my concerns. I know that this is something that Councilman Gebhardt brought up as well as other members of the council. So I suppose just a brief statement. I think that there are some concerns here, but unlike the flock cameras, because these are not collecting that type of data, having that type of data sharing going on, I'm a lot more comfortable with these as opposed to the flock cameras. I did vote against the flock cameras when they came up for a vote. I did want to make sure to ask and listen about the fee structure, because while the motivation here is public safety, it's not about collecting fees. At the same time, if we are going to be collecting fees, it's important for me to know that those fees are going back to the city, the vast majority of those fees going back to the city rather than out of the city to a third-party vendor. it appears that the fee structure is very reasonable compared to the industry standard, and at least on par with what other major vendors are offering. I'd like to thank the department for doing its due diligence on vetting these different proposals. What I also did was, as part of a larger survey that I have for residents in Ward 2, I included a question on this topic. Now, because it's part of a larger survey, that survey is ongoing. I still have to do quite a lot of outreach, but I received an initial 50 responses. Certainly a very small sample size, but it gives me some insight here. And as I saw those responses coming in, for the most part, it was around 50-50, and at some points, those in favor of these types of cameras. I phrased the question slightly different from what was proposed. It's always tricky with drafting survey questions because you don't want to give people a book to read when they're going through a survey, but you want to fairly summarize the issue. So for the record, the specific way that I framed the question was, in contrast to non-ticketing speed displays, what is your opinion on automated ticketing? There may be a proposal in the near future for automated ticketing near school zones. And then I gave the two options of someone indicating that they would be in support of automated ticketing within a quarter mile of a school if they are at the right locations with signs that warn of their location. Option 2 of I'm opposed to any automated ticketing for speeding. And then I allowed for an other box as well. And I had expected that automated ticketing would be quite unpopular. But with this type of more or less anonymous survey where I can see the responses, but obviously I'm not going to give away any names or any information like that on who's responding or how they responded. The data that I have so far from that, again, very small initial sample size of only 50 people in Ward 2, is that there were 52% who are opposed, 42% who are in favor, 4% simply didn't answer that particular question, and then the other individual was basically voicing that they selected the opposed box, but then they also selected an other box that they would be in favor of it if the funds went to the local elementary school, which, well, that's not how city government works, but it does give me some insight as to the thought process here. And it's a rational thought process. It's just not how the city does things. So, yeah, I suppose that my other question here while we're all here is if these speed cameras and red light cameras were enacted, what would we be reasonably expecting for a total number of cameras across the city?
I believe it's still too early to say exactly how many. I think they'd be substantial. We did our review with the rough estimate of 20 red light cameras and 10 school cameras, but I think that will be very underestimated at this point.
Thank you.
Okay.
And one final comment is that, while I take the opinion of my constituents very seriously, this is also something where this is one of those issues where it's not quite as simple and straightforward as have a public opinion poll put out there and go with what the majority says, because there is a lot of information that comes up in these hearings and otherwise that would tend to influence the decision of my constituents as survey takers that they may not be present here this evening. And also, the survey, again, it was very initial. It's not completely comprehensive. And I'll admit, there are going to be flaws of my own creation with that particular survey, where I only referenced speed cameras here, not red light cameras. It seems a substantial number of the cameras at issue would be red light cameras.
1 minute, Councilman.
So I think that the takeaway from the survey that I had for me is that my initial expectation that these types of cameras would be heavily unpopular, that assumption of mine was not founded. And so this is definitely something that I'm keeping an open mind on. And I think that if we are going in this direction, then I think that this does appear to be the appropriate vendor. So I would like to thank you both and the department for all of your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Lattisaur.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Colonel and Major.
Good evening.
The fees that were discussed to this point, are those fees that we're going to be charged, the ones I'm talking about, are those charges going to stay fixed over the 5-year contract on this?
Yes.
Okay. Are we to assume that the revenue that comes back from these speeding tickets will be going into the general fund?
Yes, sir.
And I think I understood you correctly, but I'm going to ask, did you say that the fines for speeding at the school locations are less than they are at other locations?
Yes, they're $50 with through the automated camera speed zone program, and red lights are $85. Apparently, there's a story behind that goes back many, many years where the fine was higher, I believe, for school zones initially, when initially started many years ago, and at some point it was reduced. I don't know the history beyond that part.
Councilman, I'm sorry, in that state, are the fines determined by state?
That's state enabling legislation beyond our control, the 50 and 85, yes.
Thank you, okay. I'm sorry, Councilman, and thank you.
So did I just understand you to say that that is a state regulation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, to tell you the honest truth. You know, we're talking about protection of the kids and the folks that cross these streets, et cetera, but yet the fines are less in front of a school. That's ridiculous. To Councilman Gebhardt's point, I just want to circle back to one of his points. City vehicles, and I'll just leave it generic with city vehicles. If city vehicles, let me hold that question. What's the calibration going to be on these cameras? So I received very few comments from my constituents about this one way or another. One of the comments was, so if we're going, 1 mile over the limit of 5 or whatever the number is, what is the calibration that is going to be set on these cameras that will trigger a ticket?
That's to be determined, but I can tell you we're not going to put it right at the...
I don't understand what you said.
That's to be determined, but I can tell you it will not be right at the exact threshold.
So to be determined, that could mean, 1 mile over or 5 miles over or what? I mean, is there some idea as to what the police department is going to be using for the benchmark?
Certainly don't want to advertise it, but most cities and towns use 10 miles per hour as the threshold. And we can also set the same with the red light violations as well. So as a matter of judgment in court, it's that thick white line at the intersection if the light turns red before you go over that. But we can dial it back half a second, whatever we want to do based on the intersection and what the study tells us. But you're right. If it's a 20-mile school zone, people are not going to be getting ticketed for going 23, and which is why we push this so much. And we say, we're giving you 10 miles an hour over the limit, right? So if you're going 31 in a school zone, shame on you. You deserve the $50 ticket.
Right. So that would be at the discretion, that calibration would be at the discretion of the police department?
Correct.
So that number, whatever that arbitrary number would that number be consistent with all the cameras?
Yes.
Or it would be with all the cameras?
Correct.
It's also something that could change from colonel to colonel, from administration to administration, right? That's something that could change.
Or accident from accident. If we see that, it's certain, Councilman Gebhardt brought up an interesting, scenario over by the Cedar Hill School, which that's vastly different than Strawberry Field Road. So, if we notice that it wasn't doing any type of traffic calming, then, maybe you would make the executive or the decision to speak with the folks at Ultimate and determine whether or not we needed to do something based on the traffic statistics. But
Sure.
I care more about the safety than obviously saying we're not making enough money at this intersection. So, let's lower the speed by 5. That's not why we're here.
Well, obviously that revenue thing was certainly a question or a concern of mine a few weeks ago, as opposed to the safety value of these things. So now I'm going to circle back to my other question with city vehicles, and again, generic city vehicles. If they are exceeding that, and I'm not talking about, let me back up. So other than an emergency vehicle responding to an emergency, lights flashing, sirens going, will city vehicles also be tagged if they exceed that calibration number? Ticketed.
That and the red lights.
And the red lights.
Each ticket is going to be evaluated by a sworn officer. And essentially what's going to happen, if it's an emergency vehicle, then they're not going to receive a ticket if they're going on a priority response. And then based on the other types of tickets, we would look at it from an administrative standpoint at that point. And, if the administration decides that they want to take a hard stance after meeting with all the directors and that they want to fine the individual drivers, then they have the ability to do so. If they want to handle those infractions administratively, they will have the ability to do that as well. So again, I don't have an answer for you. It's definitely a good question. And that's something that we can take up in the future with the administration and how they want to handle department discipline.
Well, to me, I think that if
the other issue too is the registered owner is the culprit in a sense. So if my wife is driving my vehicle and she goes through one of these tickets, it's going to come to me. I'm still responsible for it. A city vehicle may be more difficult to find out who was actually operating that vehicle. So there have to be a little bit of investigative work to determine who that was. It wouldn't make any sense to just send a ticket to the
But
DPW.
typically, the drivers of those vehicles, whether it be police officer assigned to a certain car, your cars all have numbers on them. They have drivers
Sure.
assigned to them. Same thing with the fire trucks, right? They have drivers assigned to them every day. I'm sure if I were to call the fire chief and say, who's driving, engine 10 right now, he would know.
Maybe not. I wouldn't say that that's a standard thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you certainly could do some investigative work to find out who's driving the car.
But my point is, I don't see that any different than your average citizen driving down Warwick Neck Avenue or West Shore Road or Strawberry Field Road, who is not responding to an emergency and is just going from point A to point B and is doing 35 and a 25, why that individual should just be, okay, it's all right because you're in a city vehicle. It's not all right.
I agree.
These tickets that will be issued for red lights and the speeding, will those violations be reported to the driver's insurance company?
No, it won't affect your insurance and it won't go on your state of Rhode Island driver's abstract.
Okay. I think I heard, I don't remember, it was one of you saying that there will be times when the speed cameras and perhaps the red light cameras will not be active. Did I hear something say about that?
Yeah, the school zone cameras, they won't be ticketing people on Saturdays and Sundays and holidays and at midnight. It's during school hours, during school days. So 180 days a year, they'll be working and running, and otherwise will not be.
So I'll use a street in my ward, Warwick Neck Avenue. I have a school, I have a church, and I have a daycare on Warwick Neck Avenue. And as we know, I've certainly been pretty vocal about the speeding and requesting police intervention, et cetera. So those cameras, if a camera is put over there, I don't have any red lights on Warwick Neck Avenue, but we do have those other facilities. Those cameras, the speed cameras, they will not be active when the school is on summer vacation?
Correct. They're school zone cameras. And, just like this, the school zone reduces the speed during school hours, those are the hours when it would be, the cameras would be activated. But these cameras are not a substitute for traffic enforcement.
Sure.
They're merely a force multiplier.
Could those speed cameras, I know there's quite a few of us that have installed those solar speed flashing signs, which have been, at least in my area, they've been very effective. Could those speed cameras be incorporated into that same post?
They wouldn't be able to connect with that software. I mean, as far as mounting to a pole, I mean, that's one thing that could probably happen, but
Okay.
they wouldn't be incorporated. Or the idea of this company is it's not going to be meshed in with other technology like that, or like the flock
Sure.
system or anything like that.
These speed cameras, when they identify the vehicle, does that camera identify anything beyond the vehicle and the license plate? Does it have an identification of the occupant of the vehicle, or if somebody's got a phone in their hand, or
It's not getting that.
sandwich?
It's not getting bumper stickers, things like damage. No.
Okay. And in the collections, when and if something has to go off for collection, I think I saw in there was a $10 fee for that. Does the recipient of the ticket pay the $10, or is that deducted from the city's revenue?
My interpretation on that at this point is that's comes off our bottom line. To the extent of how many tickets go to collection, I don't know. I talked to East Providence, and what they said is common is a registered owner of a vehicle will come into municipal court with a fistful of tickets they didn't know about because either they moved and they were going to the wrong address, or their child was driving the car, or another relative, and they never heard about it until they got 6 tickets. So in that situation, they walk into a municipal court, such as is in East Providence, and they'll try to work with them a little bit on meeting in the middle on the fines.
So if there is someone who just kind of like, says, I'm not going to pay the ticket, catches the chase is on, the violator of not paying the ticket, would that be reported to the registry?
As far as I'm aware, the registry does not have any enforcement aspect to this, such as unpaid fines.
Wow.
or whatnot. That's on, it's basically on us and the company to do our best to pursue these people. And yeah, they're not. I looked into that, whether or not they would levy any suspensions on registrations or the owner's driver's license, and to my knowledge, the answer is no.
1 minute, Councilman.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
You got anything?
So enforcement is going to require some effort in some cases. The management of the data, this data that's collected, I would assume that the department has done your due diligence in researching whomever that party is that's going to be gathering and documenting or storing this information?
Yes, that's our proposed vendor. And again, the legislation set forth in the state of Rhode Island requires that after 90 days, any data be discarded, erased. So they're not warehousing data for extended periods of time.
And when
Thank
did you say
Councilman,
that
I'm sorry,
collected
the
data
time,
would be
the time is up
destroyed?
now. I'm going to go on to another council person to ask a question.
Can I
If
just
you'd
get
like
an
to
answer on that
continue your
question I just
questions, you
asked?
can request
Could I
additional
just
time
get
from
an
the
answer
committee.
on that question I just asked?
You've already allocated 14 minutes. We allocated the time because of the answers and questions. We can come back after we give other council people an opportunity, and then we can request more time from the committee.
You know,
Thank
something,
you,
Chairman,
Counsel.
it would have taken the major less time to answer that simple question than what you
Councilman,
just spent.
Councilman, I'm
Thank
being respectful, everyone. Thank you. Councilwoman Travis.
Thank you. I work with tickets all day long, so I know I get aggravated when I'm on the road and I see so many people going through red lights now. It's worse than it's ever been. And it has to be addressed, that's for sure. But the biggest problem I'm having is that it's not even one car going through. There's multiple cars going through a red light where in an intersection, that's going to be a bad accident. And especially, I mean, I've never been a light jumper. So just Thursday night, I was on Airport Road. I was the first car at the red light that was going to turn left to Commerce Drive. There was a Jeep behind me. A gentleman pulled up the third car. He actually passed on the left, which that means he was in the oncoming lane. He passed both of us, went through the red light to go to Commerce Drive. Now, if that light turned green, the arrow, I would have turned. I mean, thank God I don't go the light jumper. But that's how an accident happened. I've never seen somebody pass on the left and pass multiple cars and go through a red light. But it's every day I see it getting worse. Now, the red light, that goes to municipal court, right? The fines?
Yes, these are all municipal court
Yes.
jurisdiction, yes.
Right. Because I see a lot of municipal court stuff come in, but then we got the RITT tickets too. But, and Airport Road is a nightmare for all stuff, speeding and everything else. But the red light, I mean, the cops can't be everywhere. And it seems like they're going through red lights everywhere. So it's just like, I don't even see like if anybody ever gets caught. Because, every time I see them, multiple people are going through those red lights. And I was concerned with the same questions that other people, a lot of the questions I had, there's already been asked. But do you have a set goal that you know that the cameras cost this much money so we can get this many cameras? Are the cameras all one price or is there two different prices or that?
Okay, so let me go back to my data here. Okay, so this is for the school zones. It's a $50 citation, $7.80 processing fee. The net proceed is $42.20.
Yeah, I got that.
The camera for a speed zone monthly is $24.85. So the way I did this is I totaled the camera fee for the entire year, divided that by 180 school day calendar, because you can't do it 365 because they're not working 365.
I don't see the purpose of why it only has to happen during school time either. I mean, people are going to go through red lights and they're going to speed all year long. And that's more revenue we would be making if you just left them running and we could write tickets.
Yeah, the red lights are 24/7, 365. The speed zones were legislated only for school zones during school hours. They don't want to be disingenuous and have people getting a ticket at midnight on a Saturday night for a school zone area. So based on the company's 70% citizen payment rate, we would need 4.25 violations per location per school day to break even.
Okay. I wrote that down here. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Sinapi.
forget which council person asked as far as stats on reduction of accidents, but Turn to 10 reported a while back that Pawtucket saw a 20% decrease in accidents across the city since they implemented cameras, and in certain areas where the cameras were implemented, a reduction of 30% for motor vehicle accidents. Personally, most of the calls I get on the issue, people are highly in favor of the concept. Some people fervently so. I myself have, one time almost got straight up killed on the intersection of Harding Road in Centerville with me and my kid as someone blazed through the right light 6 to 10 seconds after in a giant truck. And I was just thankfully too tired to accelerate right away when it went green, or I definitely would have been dead, and my kid might not have fared much better. But ever since then, him and I both take note regularly of all the times we watch people fly through that same light, and it's a blind turn, or it's a blind curve rather, for anyone coming out of Harding. So you won't see him coming, but you're going to get hit. And I've seen at least one accident happen there too. So I can't be more in favor of the concept, especially if it's implemented fairly. And given that the state is very adamant about that being the case, and we saw what happened when it wasn't done correctly, and I think it was either East Providence or Pawtucket, I forget which, but that was taken care of, and I haven't seen it pop up again as a hot button issue along those lines, at least. People who aren't in favor usually aren't in favor for the same reason, either the privacy aspect or because they prefer not to get a ticket. And that's all well and good, but fully pointed out, the law is the law. You got to follow it. So those who don't wish to, their complaints fall on deaf ears, unfortunately. So definitely in favor of this, and the fact that it will likely bring in revenue is an added bonus on top of the safety feature. So looking forward to getting this passed.
Thank you, Councilman. Any further questions, comments from any council people? Councilman Lattiser has a request for additional time. Is there a motion for members of the council committee?
I make a motion to give him the 2 minutes to ask his final question.
I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Councilman Lattiser, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Major, I know that you said you didn't have an idea how many cameras were going to be involved, with this process. How many cameras were assumed in the administration's revenue prediction of 1.3 million?
I believe Deputy Chief had come up with that figure based on 20 red light cameras and 10 school zone cameras. And I think that we'll have a lot more than that.
20 red and 20 school?
20 red light, 10 school zone cameras.
And 10 school zones, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Questions, comments from members of the public, please, on PCR. And I blanked out, hold on. 55-24. Please introduce, identify your name. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Comar, Ward 1. I have some friends in Pawtucket which have experienced their camera system, and the word's gotten out. If you want to beat the fine, you pay the court fee, go to court, you ask for the officer that witnessed you speeding, and if no one shows up, you're off the hook. And the word's gotten out. So I don't know how you rectify that, or if you're counting on that revenue. It'll soon be known that you can go to court. If no officer shows up, you don't have to pay the ticket. Have you had any experience in municipalities
Major?
with that?
The police department, we hold our officers accountable. There's no excuse for missing court. So if a motorist contests a violation, they get a subpoena or get a court notification from our prosecution division personnel to be there. And if they not, then we handle that internally. I could say with these cameras, since there's not an officer issuing the violation on scene, there's an officer on our end that reviews the site, the automated ticket, okay, the automated violation process. That's per the law. They have to review the footage of the vehicle going through a red light or speeding in a school zone, and they basically validate it and allow it to be processed and sent to the motorist. If that comes up, that person could be called to court, but less likely because they're not issuing it per se. They're reviewing it, not issuing it. And if they are, there's a good chance that they're working, and the court's now held during daytime hours, so it's during their work time anyway. So there's definitely accountability with our officers showing up to court.
Well, if the system's different than Pawtucket, because people are getting off the hook because there's no officer witnessing the speeding. And I would think that is going to prove the same way in Warwick's municipal court.
Are you speaking of the automated program or just tickets in general?
Not
It's like-
tickets in general, this automated one.
I can tell you there may be variation from department to department, but we hold ourselves to a high standard where we require our officers to be at court, and there are no excuses for not being there, and we handle that if there's any issue with that.
Well, I'm not sure if you can count on any value. I liked your math to beginning. Realistically, maybe this is how many tickets, violations will be issued, and maybe that revenue will be collected. But if people realize they can get off, if there's no witnessing officer, that word's going to get out just like it did in Pawtucket. But I thank you for your answer. My second point is there's a reason why people are speeding and going through red lights. I see it more and more in Warwick. And it's because we have more traffic and people are late for their appointments, or they didn't account for the jam up on a particular road. So what I'm going to ask this council to do, and this is long overdue from DOT, but we also have city signals as well, is to do a resolution to DOT and the DPW Police Department to optimize the timing of our traffic signals. I go through the intersection of Hoxie all the time. I can tell you the queuing, which is the backup to make a left-hand turn or right-hand turn onto one of the roads at that intersection, differs in the AM peak hours of traffic, and it differs in the PM. And we need a study. So I think to get to the root of the problem is let's optimize the timing of the traffic lights, both as DOT and on local roads. And people will realize that traffic can operate a lot smoother if these signals are optimized that line up in a row, that you just keep traffic flowing. The majority of the major traffic turns and flow keeps going. So I hope the council will do a resolution to DOT, and DPW, and the police department to optimize timing of traffic signals. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Good evening.
Hi, Leah Hazelwood, Warwick resident. I'm on the Warwick School Committee. And I wanted to say that as a school committee member, I really support this measure because I travel to schools on a weekly basis, every day almost. I'm in a different school, and there is always speeding in those areas. We have as many police officers on the road as possible, but there's no way for them to be everywhere, getting everyone in these school zones. And I have to make a confession along with Councilman Foley. I was in East Providence and I didn't know I was even in a school zone. But when I got that ticket, now I'm extra careful every time I drive in that area. And hopefully that will be the end result, that everybody's behavior will be changed. We'll have safer roads for our kids and our families. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's finish up with it. Are there any further comments, questions from members of the public? Thank you.
Ann Sheridan, Shitty Glen Drive. Major, is this vendor the same vendor that's using any other service, any other provider in the city, the state, Pawtucket, Providence, or is this somebody different?
This is not one of the ones currently in use in Rhode Island.
So he'll be forewarned about the issue that we have with the multiple plates and the fact that you can have the same plate on a passenger car or commercial or whatever. So people end up getting tickets for their not vehicle because it's the wrong plate type that's matched to their name.
Yes, we take that into account, and again, the officer reviewing the citation, giving the final approval for the
tickets-
citation confirms the status of the plate and whether it's combination, commercial, passenger, so on and so forth.
Motorcycles, apparently there's a bunch of different plate types that all have the same numbering scheme. The next question I have is there a sliding scale on these tickets if they haven't been paid, like in 90 days, so that there's a large fee? I mean, I know if you used to get a traffic ticket, after 30 days, it went up 60 days, and after 90 days, it was like tripled.
Speaking to East Providence, it's they've had better luck in trying to work out something with the motorists than to try to levy any penalties and collections and whatnot. Again, a lot of the time, the registered owner, because it's the registered owner that is on the hook for the ticket, not necessarily the person that's driving the car during the time of the violation. They tend to encounter those people who may have been unaware of the tickets, and then they work with them to come to an agreement about payment.
I thoroughly agree with this process. I just think that we need more rather than less. I think we should start the city out with a huge slam. School district, we're going every school to start with, and then if it doesn't work, we can pull back. But I think if we're interested in the safety of the children and not just revenue, then picking one school over another one is really not in the best interest. On the other hand, I think that the hours in effect should be closer to the beginning and the ending of the day. I mean, to go down Love Lane at noon when Cedar Hill is closed, the kids are all in school, there's nobody running around except the one parent that's bringing in the kid because they were out the day. I don't think it would be quite fair. And we've all been guilty. We've all done I get caught at Bayview in the middle of the afternoon when who would ever think you're on that street at 2 o'clock and you're getting a parking ticket before, or actually it was 1 o'clock. The other thing is we have school zone ticketing, speeding. We have red lights that are wonderful, but I think we need to have speeding, electronic speeding. I mean, I think Division Street, and maybe I guess I'm just don't complain to you about the right things, because Division Street would be a game changer. I mean, it would probably support the city's revenue with the speeding. I mean, it's just ridiculous, and certain hours of the day is even more interesting. I mean, if you go between 11 o'clock on a Friday and 3 o'clock in the morning, either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, I mean, it's like a speedway. So if we could add one more set of tickets, some more electronic signs, I would be very happy to see speeding signs around the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheridan. I do appreciate you bringing up the license plate, as I have war veteran plates with 4 numbers on it, and I'm always getting charged an Easy Pass for a commercial plate with the same 4 numbers. So I do appreciate that comment. Are there any further comments, questions from members of the public? Thank you. May I have a motion from this committee?
Move favorable action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Major.
Thank you.
Next will be PCR 59-24, resolution relative to bids. The first item found on page 1 is the Warwick Police Department. Long time no see, Major. This is Class A body repair and painting. Major?
Major Sullivan for the police department. So this is bid 2025-046, Class A auto body repair and painting. The police department went out to bid for Class A auto body repair and painting. Bids were received from Affordable Auto Body of Warwick, West Warwick Auto Body of West Warwick, Tasca Collision of Kristen. The police department recommends awarding the contract to all three vendors so as to keep a rotating list as we have been doing in the past. The department is seeking spending authority in the amount of $65,000 from budget code 76-358 insurance proceeds and $35,000 from budget code 30-330 auto and vehicle maintenance. This contract period would begin August 23rd, 2024 and expire August 22nd, 2025.
Thank you, Major. Are there any questions from members of this committee? Are there any questions from members of the council? Are there any questions from members of the public for item number 1, bid 2025-046? Thank you, Major.
Thank you.
The next item will be bid 2025-059, DPW, purchase of one Chevy Silverado 3500 HD with a plow package. Good evening, Christy.
Good evening, Christy Moretti, Public Works. Public Works is requesting to purchase one Chevy Silverado 3500 HD with a plow package from Liberty Chevrolet under State MPA 563 in the amount of $95,876.27.
Is there anything in particular we should know, or is this just part of our modernization of our fleet?
I apologize.
No, that's
This is approved under the ARPA funding, which is where the monies will be spent from. And yes, it will be in addition to our fleet that we have in the Highway Division.
And with the plow package, that means direct services to the city in case of any,
Yes.
whether it be during the summer for the city, but also it's adaptable to have the plow on it to be able to service our streets
Yes.
during snow in the winter years, months?
Yes.
Thank you. Questions from members of this committee? Questions from members of the councils that haven't been asked yet? Councilman Lattisaw.
Hi, Christy.
Hi.
Did the department do any research to see if there were similar vehicles available at a lesser price? Or did you just resign yourself to the fact that you were going to go with the MPA?
Well, it's difficult to get vehicles that suit our needs, built to our specification. So yes, we were able to secure one through the state MPA, and that is the route that we went.
So is that to mean that no one called around other dealers to get a price on this same type of vehicle?
Correct.
And you had informed us that initially we had approved a bid for 2 vehicles for $140,000, and at some point realized that you can't get, or you couldn't get 2 vehicles for that monies. So what happened between the time you came to us for 140 for 2 to today at almost 96 in a relatively short period of time?
The additional, so we had made some modifications to our ARPA spending late 2022, early 2023. This particular purchase, we estimated based off a vehicle that was purchased, a similar vehicle that was purchased by the Water Division, that was approximately $67,000. We estimated that this vehicle would 2 vehicles would cost us $140,000 at that time. Now we're ready to purchase the vehicle, and the vehicle price was, for one, was $95,000. So rather than ask for additional ARPA funding above and beyond the $140,000 that we originally estimated, we are only requesting 1 vehicle for $95,000.
So that vehicle you used as a comparison, was that the pickup truck that we couldn't get before for $56,000?
No,
It wasn't. It was a different truck.
Correct.
Was it this type of truck?
No.
So the numbers that you, or the vehicle you used to come up with the basis of 140,000 for two wasn't a vehicle like this, it was something else.
I'm sorry, can you say that last part again?
I say the basis that you used for coming up with a request for 140,000 for two vehicles was a different vehicle than what you're asking for now.
No, it was a similar vehicle, the one that we used to base the pricing off of.
So this vehicle went up in that period of time by over $30,000 from what you had originally gotten estimates for?
The vehicle that we used previously was a bid that was advertised by the city. This vehicle is on the state MPA for fiscal year '24. It doesn't expire until, I want to say November of '26, I think. I'm sorry, January of '27. So there are incremental increases in the pricing that the vendors had to have submitted when they submitted their state bid. So yes, this is the price that we are requesting to pay for
Okay.
one vehicle under state MPA 563.
Are there any other vendors on the MPA list other than Liberty Chevrolet? And I'm asking because Liberty Chevrolet was also the one that we had to move, or you moved over to for another almost $5,000 for that pickup truck, right? So is there any other vehicle on the, any other vendor on the MPA list that has, might not be a Chevy, but it could be a Ford, or it could be a Toyota, or whatever it is. Are there any other vehicles on an MPA list?
There are, yes, there are other vendors on the MPA list.
But yet you said earlier that no one from your department reached out to any of those vendors for a price on this vehicle either.
We didn't because we were looking for a Chevrolet 3500 HD with a plow package.
Oh, because I thought you said earlier that you had not reached out to any other vendor.
We didn't. We reached out to Liberty Chevrolet because they were on the state MPA,
Okay.
which we are allowed to do under 5610 of this, of the city charter or the code of ordinances.
Okay. Chairman, I'd like to request a PCR on this, please.
City Clerk, may I have a PCR? Roger. It's okay. You said 60-24? Correct? Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, bid 2025-059 is now PCR 60-24. Per request, Councilman Lattiser. I have a quick follow-up question before I continue. If I understood this correctly, the councilman asked if you asked, Councilman, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please, for my clarification, you asked Director Moretti if the city reached out to any vendors outside the state MPA, reached out to any dealers outside the state agreed contract to see if they were cheaper vehicles, correct?
That was my first question.
That was your first question, and she said no, they did not. And then you stated that no, you contacted Liberty because they are the Chevy dealership identified in the state MPA.
Yes, they are a Chevy dealer on the state MPA. That's correct.
Okay, so when you answered that question, and again, this is clarification, I'm not setting anything up. When he asked you if you contacted any outside, you were taking it as, correct me if I'm wrong, you were taking it as outside of the authorized dealers of the MPA.
Well, the first question, I understood. No, we did not contact anybody else. The second question was, did we contact anyone else on the state MPA? And the answer to that is also no.
Okay, thank you.
That was my second question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Are there any other questions from members of the council? Are there any questions from members of the public? Any questions on members of the public? Thank you. May I have a motion on PCR 60-24?
Favorable action.
Second. Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Chrissy. Item number 3 is bid 2025-040, citywide street striping. That is found on page 8. I took my time. My understanding, Ms. Moretti, is that you have a request to amend?
Yes, I do. I would like to amend the dollar amount from 80,000 to 35,000. I made an error when I submitted the paperwork and included a funding source that is not for street striping. That was my mistake.
Thank you. So you are reducing this amount, you are reducing to 45,000. I mean, sorry, reducing from 80,000, reducing 45,000 to 35,000.
Yes.
Thank you very much. 35,000 is now the requested amount. So I will go ahead and continue. Oh, may I have a PCR for 2025-040? Thank you. We are now PCR 61-24. I will continue through with questioning from the council and the public. We will then move for favorable for the amendment and then move favorable as amended. Questions from members of this committee? Questions from members of the council?
Yeah.
I just realized I didn't give you an opportunity to speak. Do you mind if we just go to the questions, or do you want to make the statement?
Nope, not at all. That's
Thank
fine.
you. Councilman Lattiser, thank you.
Thank you, Christie. The striping that you're talking about, is this going to be a different quality product than what we have in the past? And the reason I'm asking this is there's been, over the past year, several crosswalks in my area that have been restriped, but don't hold up. And it seems as though the traffic is just wearing these things out within, 4 or 5 months.
This is not for crosswalk striping. We do that in-house. This bid is for the center double yellow line and the fog lines that you see on the main arteries, basically through the city roads.
It's for the what, please? I couldn't hear you.
The double yellow center lines
Okay.
and the fog line,
I
the
see.
white line along the side. It's not for crosswalks.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilwoman Travis.
Yes, thank you. Now, I just heard you say this is for the center lines?
Yes, the
This
double
isn't
yellow.
the lines where they park the car?
No.
Because I was curious about the reduction, because I know I waited 2 years to get striping on Oakland Beach Avenue and was told that they ran out of paint and every other kind of excuse there was. But the crosswalks is not for that either.
No, the crosswalks and the parking spots that you're speaking of, we do in-house.
Okay.
We have a striping machine that does those.
All right, so it has nothing to do with this. All right, then. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any further questions from members of the council? Questions from members of the public? On formal bid 2025-040, now PCR 61-24. Thank you. May I have a motion to amend the amount from 80,000 reduced 45,000, now the new amount of $35,000?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
May I have a motion to, as amended?
Move favorable action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is item number 4, bid 2025-041, DPW HVAC services for city-owned buildings. Mrs. Moretti.
Christy Moretti, Public Works. Public Works received 3 bids. We're recommending award to Phalanx Engineering in the amount of $80,000 for a 1-year period, August 30, 24 to August 29, 2025. And this is for HVAC services in all city buildings.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of this committee? Are there any questions, comments from members of the council? Questions, comments from members of the public? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next will be item number 5, bid 2025-047. This is vehicle paint repair and painting for the Warwick Police Department. Major, I understand you would like to amend?
Yes, I think somewhere along the way we lost the second part of the second funding source, which is 35,000 additional out of code 3330.
Please, one step at a time. We want to amend it to include budget code number, please.
Yeah, so right now it stands at 65,000 under budget code 76358. That's how you have it.
Yep.
What I'd like to do is add into that 35,000 from budget code 30-330, and that would raise the overall spending authority to 100,000.
So I'm going to repeat it just so we're all on the same page. You're requesting to amend to add in $35,000 to the bid from budget code 30-330 to increase the total amount of this bid to 100,000.
Yes.
Thank you, Major. Yes. I'm sorry, I was still writing. Give me 1 minute. All right, go ahead. What's city clerk, man, please have another PCR? Thank you. So may I have a motion on PCR 60-24 to amend?
What? Questions?
Yes, no, we're going to do the thing to amend, and then we'll go ahead and go through. May I have a motion to amend to increase the bid to 100,000 and 35,000 from budget code 3330?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now discussion. Are there any questions from members of this committee? Questions from members of the council? Councilman Lattisaw.
Thank you. Major, why did you say you needed to increase it to 35,000 or by 35,000? Sorry.
So that's how it was originally drafted in my position letter that you should have in front of you, hopefully. So basically, that's how it was laid out, similar to the Class A auto body, which I previously presented. It's a 65-35 split, insurance proceeds and auto vehicle maintenance funds. That's how this one was originally done. I just think it didn't make it to the docket. So when I saw the docket today, it was only had the 65,000 portion on there. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, so, yeah, I see that here. It says, we request permission to expend up to 65,000, which proved will be allocated from department's budget code 76358. So my question is, should this be stating 65,000 comes out of code 76358 and 35,000 coming out of code 30-330?
That was the very next sentence.
But what I just understood from the major, and maybe I understood wrong, was that the whole 100,000 was coming out of 3330?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, Councilman, the major requested that 35,000 come from budget code 30-330 to make the total requested amount 100,000.
I get it.
Yes.
But on the package we have right here, it says code 3330, 65,000.
Which is?
That's what it says, 65,000.
Mr. Chairman,
Solicitor.
my understanding is the amendment that was made recognized that the addition would be tied specifically to code 30-330, which I believe is the councilman's question.
Say that again.
Please say again, Solicitor.
The amendment that was made is adding $35,000 specifically drawn from 30-330 so that what I understand is it's not 100,000 from one account. It was one amendment that added $35,000 and it took it from that other account. So it'll be denoted when the sub A comes through the system.
So is the sub A going to show the 65,000 coming out of budget code 76358? Because that's not what I'm understanding right now.
So I can clarify if you wish.
So again, I'm just going to, for clarification, the very bottom paragraph.
Yep.
Just bear with me. I'm going to we request permission to expend up to $65,000, which, if approved, would be allocated from the department's budget code 76-358 insurance proceeds. Also, an additional $35,000, if approved, would be allocated from the department code budget code 30-330 auto and vehicle maintenance. And thus the contract period would be from August 23rd of 2024 to August 22nd of 2025. The current contract expires August 20. On our document here, it identifies just as 65, so that's why the major is here to clarify the clerical error and get the correct, for a total bid amount of 100,000.
I get it. And I'm going to go to what you just said.
Yes.
In my opinion, this should be reading 65,000 comes from budget code 76358 and 35,000 coming from budget code 30-330 for a total of 100,000.
So you want, it says it just doesn't say for a total of.
No, but Chairman, if this is approved right now, what you're saying is the whole 100,000 is coming out of budget code 330, and it's not. 65,000 is coming out of budget code 76358, and 35,000 is coming out of budget code 3030.
Councilman, for clarification with I have it right here, to amend the bid to add 35,000 from budget code 30-30 for a total amount of $100,000. That's what I have.
May I
Mr. Chairman,
approach?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
Councilman, if I can.
Solicitor.
Councilman Lattiser is looking at the actual bid document that says the code and $65,000. What he's asking for is in the PCR that we will see that follows for this update to recognize that the 3330 is being used for what was amended and that the noted account of 76,358 be updated on the original sheet. I think Major, are you in concurrence?
Yes, so there's
Director.
two funding amounts each coming from a separate funding source. The way the docket is displayed has one funding amount coming from, and it lists the incorrect, they're backwards, if that makes sense.
Thank you. So what the councilman's saying after much discussion, so the councilman is looking at the cover letter, if you will, the cover paper, where it says the bid advertised date, the bid opening date. He's looking at that page, which would be page 12 on the bid package, Major. It says code 330, and then across from it says 65,000. So the councilman is looking at that, which is what we're clearing up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to the amendment to clarify that basically what your paper says. So I'm just
Yes,
going
to make it easiest, my position letter, the last paragraph or next to last paragraph is the accurate version.
Yeah. That's what we were saying, is that, yeah, go right ahead. Major, the councilman's going to come up.
Without objection by the council
Solicitor.
members, without objection by the council members, this is a recommendation to the full council, we can make clear that the wording is accurate, that this will be split in the manner that was on record here and proceed forward. There is a discrepancy between the recommendation letter and the underlying bid, and we can have that clarified before the full council, whereby the 65,000 is designated from 76,358 and the 35,000 is designated from 30-330.
Thank you. Any questions from the comments of the solicitor? We're clear? Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Are there any further questions from members of the council? Are there questions on PCR 62-24 from members of the public? May I have a motion as amended?
Move favorable action as amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Major.
Thank you.
We are now at the part of the bid package where I will call on members of the committee, members of the council, and members of the public if they have any items that they would like to discuss from the bid package. I'll give everyone a moment. Thank you. I am. Are there any item from the bid package to members of the council? Councilman Sinapi.
I have to abstain from one, the Griggs and Brown. So I
Could you-
need it pulled.
Do you have the number on that?
Yeah, it's, let's see. 2025-044. Number
Okay,
16.
thank you. That is item number 16. He's going to abstain.
Or recuse, I should say, sorry.
When we get to that. Thank you, Councilman. Is there no further? When we get to it, we will, yes. Thank you. Councilman Lattisaur.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Item number 8, found on page 24. That's 2024-370.
Yes, sir.
Item number 9, 2023-171, found on page 28.
Yes, sir.
Item number 15, 2025, found on page 67.
Yes.
And item number 21, found 2024-451, found on page 95.
Thank you, Councilman.
Welcome.
Any other items that members of the council would like to discuss? Are there any items on the bid package members of the public would like to discuss? Thank you. We'll go in order as they were called. So the first item will be item number 8.
Yeah.
That is bid 2024-370.
Councilman Howe?
Council President.
Hold on 1 second.
Yes.
As we're approaching the start of the 7 o'clock meeting and there are multiple items left for discussion, we do need to refer out business on a public hearing. So it would be, if the council would indulge, it would probably be timely for the Public Properties Committee to come into play so we can have the public hearing in play for the full council and come back to finance at the rise.
Will do. For the record, we'll pick up where we left off after the public properties. No objection to this body. I call the Finance Committee in recess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the Public Properties Committee will meet at this time. They're just going to refer to the full council for the public hearing, which will start after 7 o'clock. Thank you. Have a seat. I don't care. All right, thank you.
The City Council Committee on Public Properties, Land Use, and Community Affairs convenes at 6:49 p.m. First item on the agenda, PCO-6-24, order on the abandonment of a portion of Cypress Street, 115 Maple Street LLC petitioners. I'm going to recommend moving to public hearing before the full council. No public discussion or comment is required, as there would be a public hearing before the council as a whole. Do I have a motion to move for public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and this item will be heard shortly after 7 o'clock, shortly after the city council opens. Okay, second item on the agenda. This is Councilman Sinapi. So this is PCR-131-23, a resolution dedicating Barton Farm as a municipal public trust pursuant to RIGL section 45-36.1-1 et sec, and as having conservation restrictions pursuant to RIGL section 34-39-1 et sec. Assessors Plat 251, Lot 179, commonly known as 1351 Centerville Road. Do we have a recommendation? Request to move to the pending file. And let's see, do we have a motion to move to the pending file?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item 3, PCR-57-24, a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a use easement agreement with 115 Maple Street LLC regarding Plat 283, Lot 168, a portion of Dover Road. I'm just, pardon me. City Council Solicitor, I do not see this under public hearing. I take it that no public hearing is required for this item.
It's eligible for consideration and public input at this committee at this time.
Thank you. So we do have a little bit of time before 7 o'clock. We may not be able to finish this item, and that would be okay, but let's open this up for discussion, comments, members of the committee. Okay, I'll simply state that Dover Road, it's a paper street. There are no houses and no addresses on Dover Road. And looking over the documents as prepared by the city, I have no objection to this item. With that, I'll open it up. Any comment, members of the council? Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have someone from the administration here to present it?
You can't hear.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Council President, members of the board, Lydia Cruz Abreu, Planning Department.
Thank you. No, I just, that's how we usually have a formal, just someone here to formally introduce it. So that's all I was looking for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And thank you for coming. Any comments, members of the council? Seeing none, do we have any comment from members of the public?
Is this working? Okay. Richard Langseth, Budlong Farm. I think this is an excellent solution to a very common problem that we have. Just small incursions or difficulties amongst neighbors, and it avoids the whole street abandonment process, which is very elaborate. And the one place that I want to comment on this is with our airport and the Strawberry Field Road situation. That is a perfect example for where an easement would solve the problem. In fact, in that case, we have a letter from the president of RIAC suggesting an easement rather than a full abandonment. So I'm totally in favor of this. I think it's just an excellent thing to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comment, members of the public? Councilman Gebhardt.
Just a quick question, and I'll follow up on this. Maybe it's not even a question, just a statement. That we did have a very similar scenario with a property owner in Potawatomi that we talked about at the last two meetings. And I don't recall this solution as being one of the options for them. And I will just follow up on why that was not available to them, because they did go through and pay, close to $10,000 for the street abandonment for a portion. So I'll follow up on that subsequent to this, but just want to put that on the record. Thanks, Lydia.
Thank you. Any further comment, whether members of this council or members of the public? I'll just put it out there, a brief comment, and I think that we have been a little lax here during this committee in allowing comment on issues that are not directly in front of us. That's always an area where we have to be careful here, but it seems that the comments were closely related to this particular item, and there was not discussion of any items that are not before us, and I'm not going to comment on any items that are not before us, and therefore there is no back and forth discussion of any of those types of items. So with that briefly said, I'll say that I think that there are some situations where an abandonment really is the most appropriate and necessary means available to the city. And I think that this particular situation, which involves a building that was placed at its current site in the year 1958, has been there ever since that point in time, and only affects a certain portion of that paper street. I think that this particular situation in front of us is a very appropriate use for there being a use easement, as opposed to necessitating a road abandonment. There are different consequences to each approach, and I think that there are most definitely situations where a use easement would not be appropriate, but an abandonment would be appropriate, and vice versa. Well, since I added a comment myself, I'll give one last opportunity. Comment from members of the council or members of the public? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Move favorable action.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
There being no further business of the committee, the City Council Committee on Public Properties, Land Use, and Community Affairs adjourns at 6:58 p.m.
Thank you, Chairman Ricks. We will start the full council meeting in a couple of minutes after 7 o'clock. And there is public comments this evening, so there is a sign-up sheet on the podium. We'll see you back here in a few minutes. Good evening, everyone. I call the June 17th, 2024 City Council meeting to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister?
Here.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Here.
Mr. Howe?
Here.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Here.
Mr. Ricks?
Here.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 present.
Thank you. Councilman McElroy, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good evening again, everyone. We are now under general communications. This is the announcements of congratulations, condolences, or community events. Do any members of the council have anything under general communications? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move to executive communications. There are none. Next up on the agenda is public comment. There is a sign-up sheet here. We're going to do the last call for sign-up for the public comments. Rule 41, after general communications and prior to the consent calendar, at the last regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council each month, there shall be a period of time not to exceed 30 minutes during which citizens may comment about Warwick city government issues subject to the following stipulations. The total period of time for public comment shall not exceed 30 minutes. Comments need to be brief in order to allow as many citizens as possible to participate. Each citizen signed up and present shall have not to exceed 5 minutes to speak, provided, however, that if more than 6 citizens are signed up and present, the 30 minutes will be split evenly among speakers. Time shall not be transferable among speakers. The topic for comment shall be issues directly affecting city government. City council members will not respond to questions during public comment period. The public comment session will terminate at the expiration of the earlier of all the speakers concluding their allotted time or 30 minutes. Waiver of this provision requires a unanimous vote of the council. Anybody else want to sign up? Last call. Okay, we have 2 individuals this evening. The first speaker is Rob C.
Good evening. I have some comments based on public records and recent media articles. First, today marks 11 months since defendant Travis violated my constitutional rights. There's been no apology or remorse from defendant Travis on her behavior, and in fact, she's attempted to comport herself as the victim. 6 months ago, I requested that this council docket a discussion to implement rules of admonishment and removal of any council member that violates any resident's constitutional rights. Since no member has since docketed this discussion, I can only assume that this council has aligned itself with defendant Travis's idea that violating a person's civil rights is acceptable. I read in the Warwick Beacon that defendant Travis will not be seeking re-election. She states that false allegations and political agitation, quote, have dictated her decision. But when you go to the courthouse and actually read all the documents of the complaints made against defendant Travis and her spouse over the last few years, one would have to wonder if the numerous lawsuits that she and her spouse have been named as defendants has anything to do with her not seeking re-election. There seems to be a pattern of behavior, and I'll discuss the particulars of these cases in detail in the coming months. Councilman McAllister has also announced he will not be seeking re-election. He first announces that he may run for mayor. He has Speaker Sakachi hold a couple fundraisers for him. He raises a bunch of money and then decides not to run for any office, which in my opinion is a good thing for Warwick. But I wonder if Mr. McAllister feels that he has a moral obligation to return the money that he collected. After all, it's kind of like accepting money under false pretenses. Councilman McElroy from Ward 4 also will not be seeking re-election to the city council. Another good thing for Warwick, in my opinion. However, he has announced that he will run for state rep for District 21. Now, here's a guy that in 6 years on the city council never uttered one question about any expenditure, never spoke one sentence during 6 budget hearings, and is well known for never returning calls from constituents, and clearly is not acting on behalf of the people he is elected to represent, only on behalf of the special interests, namely the unions. That's just what we need at the State House, another rubber stamp. I mean, I cringe when I see failed politicians seeking higher office. Speaking of rubber stamps, we've also been informed that Mr. Howe will no longer seek re-election to the council. Another plus for Warwick residents. Rumor has it that he will seek Senate office, but that's just rumor. That's a disaster in the making. Another failed politician seeking higher office. 4 years as the finance chair, which was an abject failure. I actually lost count on how many bids came before him with cost errors that he never caught. And in 2019, during the fire contract hearing, when he claimed and promised the residents that the contract would save $600,000 in overtime, but the overtime actually increased by $2 million a year. Or when he pushed the OPEB clause, ignoring members of the public, telling them that the language was illegal, yet he voted to pass it only to find out when Peter Schaefer publicly announced, in fact, that the language was illegal. I thought Mr. Howe was a math teacher, but how did he miss the $85.7 million math error on the school's Stage 2 application? Or all of the math errors contained in the $85,000 Ilana third-party review of the school construction costs, even missing the math error on the total square footage of the schools contained in the cover sheet sent to him on the Ilana report. Without objection or questions, he's just rubber-stamped every expenditure, every contract, and every budget that came before him without performing any analysis on the impact to the residents of Warwick. Every decision that he's made was to benefit special interest unions and not the residents of Warwick. When you look at these 4 council members and ask what do they all have in common other than being ethically and morally bankrupt, they all have an immediate family member that is employed by the city and is a beneficiary of their decisions. That in itself tells you who they are loyal to. Warwick residents should reject and dismiss any candidate that these 4 council members endorse for Warwick City Council. Their actions and their philosophies have had a serious negative impact on the future fiscal stability of Warwick, and anyone that they endorse to take this seat will surely continue the same poor fiscal behavior and ethical behavior. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Richard L.
Richard Langseth, Budlong Farm Road. I just want to compliment Mr. McAtee on helping me out and understanding various things. You know, sometimes city council people work behind the scenes. They don't always work in public, and we must recognize that. I just don't think that we need to have these kinds of conversations. Regarding the airport, you folks may know that the airport is blocked off Strawberry Field Road and Fieldview Avenue and Murray Street and Bunker Street. And of course, the neighbors are really concerned. So some of these folks don't really feel that they can come to city council and bitch and moan about this. But I was driving by there the other day and talking to a young lady. She's 5 years old, and she was in tears because she can't go to her playground anymore because RIAC has closed the facility down. Now the RIAC surveyor is telling everybody that the roads are going to be reopened again once their berm is finished. And I certainly hope that if the city council can work with the mayor on this to get the place open again so that the people can use their streets, it would be much, much appreciated. In the same vein, I've been asking, I asked for information. I asked for information about how the trucks are going to get from the new facility to the airport connector. And I have a letter from RIAC that I got just today suggesting there are over 1,500 emails associated with a curb cut. Now, for me, a curb cut means to move the granite over a little bit or, make it a foot wider or something like that. They want $200 from me to go through 1,500 emails about this simple curb cut. And this gets to the memorandum of understanding or agreement that the mayor is negotiating with RIAC and the FAA. I think the city council needs to be careful in dealing with RIAC. They just don't show good faith to a lot of us. And we're just not sure that they will be totally honest. I think we need to see the environment assessment done. I think we need to see all the financing, everything laid out before that memorandum is signed. I offer that advice to the city council. One more item on street abandonments. As you know, I spoke in favor of easements. Easements, whenever they can be done, is a really good idea, particularly when it comes to the airport. We really need to understand that it's a public place where the people go. In planning, we're looking for places for people and this and that. And why we would listen to an entity that just wants to close everything down is totally beyond me. Regarding abandonments, the city council has two functions. It has a legislative function and it has a regulatory function. And when you consider street abandonments, what you're doing is you're asking the public for evidence that the streets are no longer used. You're not promoting yourself. The city council should not be sitting here testifying to the fact that the streets are private or the streets are public. The city council should listen to the proponents who make the petition available and get their input on whether the streets are public or private. And then the city council is an adjudicator.
1 minute, Mr. Langseth.
Okay, thanks. And then the city council is an adjudicator. So when you're looking at abandonments, you're not legislating. You're fact-finding. And this becomes critically important when we're going to come to the eventual airport one. The one tonight, I think, I may speak in favor of it. The one tonight is great. But if the city is going to petition, if the city's going to testify as to whether that street is public or private, that's really on the edge. You have to have the lawyer do it. You have to have the people come and do it. And just a word of caution about that. And appreciate you giving me time to speak tonight. Thank you. And good luck to everybody who's leaving.
Thank you, sir. Next up, I'm going to ask members of the council, I would like to move to the public hearing. Is there any objection to moving this and taking this up at this time? Okay, hearing none. We're now on referred business, number 1, PCO 6-24, an order of abandonment of a portion of Cypress Street. Committee report, land use.
Recommend open public hearing.
Okay, seconded by Councilman Foley. All those in favor to open the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So how we do a public hearing here at the Warwick City Council is I will ask if there is someone to present this petition to the City Council. They will then make that presentation. Council members will then ask questions. Then I will move to the public and I will ask 3 times, is there anyone here to speak in favor of this project? Then I will ask 3 times, is there anyone here to speak against this project? And then I will also ask 3 times an opportunity if anyone just like to be heard on this project. So that's how these public hearings go here in the city of Warwick. So at this time, is there someone here to present PCO 6-24? And please just, everyone, we have the stenographer here this evening, so please speak directly in the mic slowly and introduce yourself when you come to the mic. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Council President, members of the council. I am John McCoy, attorney for 115 Maple Street LLC. I think you summarized this matter well. This is a petition for the abandonment of the end portion of Cypress Street. As you all have the surveys that were done and submitted, it's just a 2,100 square foot portion at the end. There are two abutters. One is 115 Maple Street LLC. The other one is Benita Flanders. We've spoken to her. She's in full agreement with this. I was working with her attorney, Brian Goldstein, prior to the planning board advisory that we went to. Just want to clarify for everybody's benefit, because it may not show on the survey that was submitted. If this is approved, this will be split right down the middle, half going to my client, the other half going to Ms. Flanders. It will serve two purposes for each of them. One for my client, it will allow him, he's going to build an addition. He'll be able to square off that addition. With the side yard setbacks, it would have been a very unwieldy jog at the end, so it made sense. Ms. Flanders will be benefiting as well, because I believe she's been perhaps parking her car at times in that little piece next to her house. She'll now be able to do so legally and with no problems whatsoever, because she'll have the one half going to her. But that was done, an appraisal was done, was submitted before planning board. The check for that amount has been submitted to the city. City has those funds, the $8,700. So everything else has been taken care of, I believe. You've got the advisory from the planning board. I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm glad to answer any questions anyone have.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Ricks, it's in your ward. Would you like to go first?
Thank you. As the city councilor for Ward 2 and also the chair of the Land Use Committee, this is one of those items that I take particularly seriously to do my due diligence. I would like to apologize to Mr. Nelson and to Ms. Flanders for not being quite as responsive as I usually hold myself to be. I did have my daughter born now 10 weeks ago, and so under more normal circumstances and nowadays, I'm certainly a lot more responsive than I had been at certain points during this process. However, I had spoken briefly with Mr. Nelson early on in this process. I was also happy to speak with Ms. Flanders later on in the process, including visiting the site, taking a little tour of that site with her, and really developing a better understanding of that particular piece of property. It's an interesting situation because her house had been built there and is one of those few houses standing on that side of Route 95. And because of when it was built, way back before Route 95 was built and Route 37, that was also from an era where we didn't have the same setbacks and the like. So her house, the door is literally feet from this abandoned, or excuse me, this street, for which there is the proposal to abandon here this evening. And so it was very important for Ms. Flanders to receive assurances of exactly what this change would look like, as she has effectively been using a portion of this paper street owned by the city for use of her driveway, as well as where she stores her garbage receptacles, which I might add are very neatly stored behind a hedge that she herself planted. She has lived at this location for many decades. This piece of property abutting this particular street, of course, has been in her family for many decades, generations. And so after speaking with, briefly, quite a while ago with Mr. Nelson and much more recently with Attorney McCoy, and also having met with Ms. Flanders, spending some time there, viewing the site, and speaking with her attorney, Mr. Goldstein, I think that this is a fantastic compromise It accomplishes the objectives for all parties. It's particularly important because, after all, these are neighbors. We want neighbors to get along. And this process is closely following those processes that the city has traditionally followed and has in its code of ordinances. I'm pleased that the applicant here, the LLC, is paying for this road abandonment, as they are the ones requesting this change to the properties, and that Ms. Flanders does not have to pick up part of the bill for this. I think that this is a fantastic solution for all involved, and I think that it certainly serves the city's interest as well, as the city has no use for this tiny portion of road that is effectively a paper road to nowhere, as the back end of that very paper road actually meets other parcels that are held respectively by 115 Maple Street LLC and by Ms. Flanders. It's a perfect solution. Thank you.
Any other members of the council have any questions at this time? Okay. At this time, are there any members of the public that would like to speak in favor of this project?
My name is Richard Langseth, Budlong Farm Road in Warwick, Langseth. I have a question through the chair, if possible. Has the public ceased to use this road? I haven't heard any testimony about whether the road is being used by the public or not.
Attorney? You can use that mic over there, so you have to keep going back and forth if you like. You can, the attorney, if you want to go here, you use that one, so then you don't have to go back and forth in case there's other questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. In answer to that, to my understanding, the only use that has been made recently at all of this little piece was summarized by Mr. Ricks before, by Ms. Flanders parking her car there and neatly storing her garbage cans. Other than that, I'm not aware of any use of that little piece.
Thank you. One other question. It's not clear to me when the LLC is purchasing its half of the street. Apparently, there's some kind of an agreement with the city where the other half is being funded by the LLC, or is the city just waiving the other side?
No, just to summarize again, as part of this process, as the council knows, an appraisal was required and submitted at the planning board level that gave the value of this piece of $8,700. That check was paid for by 115 Maple Street LLC to the city. They already have that. That was initially delivered to the planning clerk.
Thank you very much. I speak in favor of this. This is a really good thing for the elderly people living on the street. We have several situations in the city where there are elderly people that we really want to be able to be protecting and make sure they live out their life in peace and harmony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this project? Are there any members of the public that would like to speak in favor of this project? Are there any members of the public that would like to speak in favor of this project? Are there any members of the public that would like to speak against this project? Are there any members of the public that would like to speak against this project? Are there any members of the public that would like to speak against this project? Are there any members of the public that would like to be heard on this project at this time? Are any members of the public that would like to be heard about this project? Are there any members of the public that would like to be heard on this project? Okay, hearing none. Councilman Ricks, would you like to make a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second by Councilman Foley. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, any members of the council have any additional questions at this time? Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. I'll just briefly add and clarify that the appraisal is for the entirety of the public way to be abandoned, and that 115 Maple Street LLC is paying for that entire fee, as would be the city's standard process, as it is the LLC who is the applicant. It is also the standard process that when a road is abandoned, the public road, paper street, if you will, is divided straight down the middle between the two abutting property owners. So I wanted to make sure to clarify that everything here is in strict conformance with the city's standard processes, and that that is the reason why Ms. Flanders is not paying a share, as she was not the applicant. She did not initiate this process. It was something that, it was a change that was desired by the LLC, and I'm pleased that the two neighbors here, the LLC and Ms. Flanders, have been able to agree that really this is something, a change that is in both of their best interests. And similarly, to reiterate briefly, I think that this is also in the city's best interest, as the city is receiving that sum of money for a piece of road that, excuse me, not even a road, because the city had never paved it, but rather a piece of city property, part of a paper street that the city nor the public, aside from Ms. Flanders personally, had any use for, and have no reason to keep this piece of property on the city books. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions or comments? Councilman Ricks, do you have a motion?
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley and Councilwoman Travis. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, first passage.
Thank you. First passage. At this time, I'm going to ask that we pause the full council meeting. We still have some committees that have work to do. So we should go back into the Finance Committee as they're still completing their work at this time. So the full council meeting will be paused, and we'll go back into the Finance Committee meeting at this time. Thank you.
The time is now 7:34, and the Warwick Finance Committee is back in order. Picking off where we left off, I'm going to call for bid 2024-370, firefighting vessel maintenance and repairs. This was requested by Councilman Lattiser. I'm going to ask the chief identify, then Councilman Lattiser, you have the floor.
Assistant Chief from the Fire Department.
Chairman, I'm all set on that one.
Councilman, you said you're all set?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Are there any questions for members of this committee? Any questions for members of the council? Are there any questions for members of the public? Thank you, Chief. Well done.
Thank you.
Next will be item number 9. This is found on page 28. It is 2023-171, testing and repair for self-contained breathing apparatuses. Chief, identify, then Councilman Lattiser, you have the floor.
Assistant Chief Jason Howard from the Fire Department.
Thank you. Chief, this increase that you're looking for in the amount of 15,000, is this to pay any past due bills that we have?
It is not. We have no past due bills. We're just, the spending authority right now is down to $270. So we're holding off on any repairs until we can get further spending authority.
And what did you spend on these repairs last year?
Well, this fiscal year so far, we've spent $21,351. And in fiscal year 23, at least the portion that this bid covers, we spent $18,378.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chairman. I'm all set on that one.
Your Councilman, any questions from members of this committee? Questions, comments from members of the council? Questions, comments from members of the public? Thank you, Chief. Next will be bid 2025-057. That is item number 15, found on page 67. Marine boat diesel fuel. This is requested by Councilman Lattiser. Chief, please identify. Councilman, you'll have the floor.
Assistant Chief Jason Umbenhauer from the Fire Department.
I'm all set on that one as well, Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Councilman. Questions, comments from members of the committee? Questions, comments from members of the council? Questions, comments from members of the public? Well done, Chief. Thank you. Next will be the request from Councilman Sinapi. This is bid 2025-044. May I have a PCR number, please? 6324. This is a request from Councilman Sinapi to abstain. Other questions from members of the committee? Questions from members of the council? Questions from members of the public? May I have a motion on PCR 63-24?
Move favorable action.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. The final item is bid 2024-451, maintenance accessories for the ice rink. Good evening, Christie. Councilman, once Christie identifies, you'll have the floor. Director?
Christy Moretti, Public Works.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Christie. So this is the second time in maybe the past couple of few months where the department has had to come back to us because of a discrepancy in the shipping. And I can't say for certain on the most recent one, but I can say on this one that the error in the guesstimate for shipping would have put this item over the $2,500 cap and would have required it to go out for bid. And I just cannot understand why the department can't get a more accurate, if not an exact, shipping estimate on these items. Because whenever we go on Amazon, as an example, and we order whatever amount of items we order, the shipping charges are right there instantly. But yet, we just can't seem to get an accurate number on shipping charges, and I have no idea why. This particular item, in addition to checking some of the pricing, I haven't found anything on here that is of substantial weight. And it doesn't appear as though this thing's gonna, fill up a trailer truck. And we're looking at a shipping charge of $888. That shipping charge is about 40% of the cost of the items that we're purchasing. And I just don't understand why the department is not able to get the accurate shipping costs when you put in the order. I think that would be something relatively simple. The other issue is there seems to be numbers all over the place on this one. I have a copy of one item, which is a quote provided to the department on April 16th in the amount of $1,582.88. Then we have another one in the amount of, which is April 23rd, by the way, in the amount of $2,222.48. And I have not been able to figure out how this thing increased to that from 1582 to 2248. And then pile on the $888 brings us up to $3,110, because we can't get an accurate cost on shipping before this is put on a truck or before we issue the purchase order. In the purchase order issued by the city on 4/18/24, it says down the bottom that all freight charges must be prepaid. So I further don't understand how we can prepay a shipping charge when we have no idea what it is. We estimated it at $250 and it comes in at $888. And from what I can see, this just seems to be the course of action that is occurring. To have a product that the shipping costs us 40% more than the product and we don't know it ahead of time is concerning. So, Christie, what documentation did this company provide you to justify that $888? Did they give you a weight? Did they tell you that the box was too big or whatever the case may be? Did we challenge that number at all?
No, I didn't challenge the number.
We didn't. So they just send us a bill for $888 when I would assume you did your due diligence, or someone did their due diligence to come up with a number of 250, and we don't challenge something that's 3 times what we anticipated it to be. We don't challenge it.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just direct to Councilman Lattiser.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I just want to clear up a few things for you. The $1,500 quote that you see, I reached out to this company. They are part of the Sourcewell governmental bidding. So we are allowed to purchase through them. There's already a bid in place, and it's through the source. We've done this multiple times. We've done this with vehicles. We've done it with the Zamboni. So this isn't anything new. It's a cooperative purchasing agreement. So I got the pricing from this company for the items that we needed to make some repairs at the ice rink. And on the quote that you see for $1,500, those were the items that I was looking at. Some of them that I needed, and some of them were, let me see how much it is, because they're not listed in the catalog. So after I went through, and you'll see that there's items crossed off on page 102. Those are the ones that I wasn't buying. And then you can see that I indicated I needed 2 sets of gold nets, that I needed 1 of the line kits. I needed 2 of the gold creases, spreader towels for the Zamboni, and that HDPE is a piece of Kydex that is the white facing board that you see on the ice rink. So on the side of the ice rink, so you have the yellow stripe, you have the white, and then you have the top. That white piece, it's a 1/2 inch thick. It's relatively heavy. The gold nets, when they come, they're bulky. They're in a box. So they're in a bulky box. Now, it may not weigh 50 pounds, but the size of the box is substantial. So when I estimated, figuring, it goes by weight, I do the best I can. It came to us on a pallet in a tractor trailer. So I can see where it would cost $888 because it came from Minnesota. So to that end, I issued a purchase order for the $2,472. The freight came in more than we estimated, and now we have the final bill to pay. So that's basically the long and short of what happened.
So I hear what you're saying. I go back to my question prior to what you just said, is to why that number wasn't challenged. They send us a bill. If somebody sent me a bill that was almost almost four times what I was quoted, I'd be all over them because it's coming out of my pocket. I'd be all over them about that. So it's interesting to me that there is no challenge. What's more concerning is that that shipping number isn't known before you buy the product. That is a number that should be very easy for these vendors to provide. They know what the weights of these things are. They ship it every day. This isn't the first time they did this shipping. They know what the cost is to travel. It's 21 hours from where they are to here. I forget the mileage, but the driving time at 65 miles an hour is 21 hours to get here. They know all that. So to come before us and request something after a number was approved by purchasing because it's under 2,500, and then come back to us with 800 or whatever it is that brings it over 3,000 that would have required a bid, just doesn't make sense to me anyways. I don't see any reason why these shipping charges aren't known ahead of time. I think that's quite easy to do. I certainly purchased a lot of product with a lot of shipping, and I sure knew what the shipping cost was going to be. So I don't know, you do whatever you want, but it does not make sense to me that we don't have a grip on these shipping charges. And this just seems to happen more often, and it's happened just recently in the past couple of months.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
if I had to make an educated guess, I would imagine that the shipping fees do fluctuate probably from, week to week or even day to day based on the mechanism of how whatever product is getting to us, where it's coming from, the size, the weight, all these variables are part of the equation. So that I do the best I can. And yes, I'm here asking for another $634 to pay the shipping fees for something that we needed for the ice rink.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Councilman, you exceeded the time. If the members of the committee would like to give the councilman, I think the point's gotten across. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councilman Sinapi.
Not a question, just a quick comment. I think I've made it before too. This isn't at least the whole surprise shipping cost is not unfortunately unique to DPW or the city. It happens to the school committee too. It just seems vendors feel that they can do it because municipalities and school districts need their wares, and it's kind of just tough as far as they're concerned. So I'm not agreeing that it's okay. I think it's messed up. I don't agree with the fact that they do that to us, to the school committee, or to anyone else. But I do understand that, and at least in some cases, we don't have much of an option. That's not to take away from any of your points, Councilman Lattiser, because I know you spoke about far more than just that.
Thank you. Are there any further comments, questions from members of the council? Comments, questions from members of the public? Comments, questions from members of the public? Thank you. At this time, may I have a motion for PCR 59-23, resolution relative to bid?
Move favorable action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Final item on the docket today is PCR 58-24, resolution relative to issuing requests for proposals for the American Rescue Plan Act community projects. Council President McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, this is part of the ARPA neighborhood projects. These are the solar flashing lights that tells your speed We have a number of them up across the city. They've been very popular, and I've been getting a number of requests for them for different parts of the city. So this is one is for Arnold's Neck Road. It's the main entrance in and out of that neighborhood there. That gets a lot of traffic, especially at this time of year. People are enjoying the area down there, and there's also lots of ducks that are crossing the roads there every day. So we want to make sure that people are paying attention to their speed. And then 2 in Greenwood as well. We get a number of calls, and the one on Chapman's, anytime that there is an accident on Main Ave, Chapman's becomes a cut through. And then one on Natick, there's a little hill that we get a number of calls, and we've had the speed sled out there a number of times throughout the years tracking on that. So I ask the council for their support for these, and we do have the funds available left to pay for them from the ARPA funds for Ward 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any questions, comments from members of this committee? Questions, comments from members of the council? Questions, comments from members of the public? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Move favorable action.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The time is now 7:52, and the Warwick Finance Committee has completed its business.
Thank you, Chairman Howe. The next committee to meet is the Ordinance Committee, and that can meet at this time.
Good night, gentlemen.
Yep.
Is when he applied, there's 2 programs involved. Make sure he applied to both of them. Child Inc. and there's Precious something. The website has a number to call for any questions he has. I'm gonna go over here before you yell at me. Hey, Steve.
I've been wounded. So Ordinance Committee will convene at 7:53 p.m. First and only item before us is PCO 5-24, an ordinance clarifying street abandonment procedures for circumstances where the city of Warwick is an applicant and the mayor certifies that it serves the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the city. And I happen to be the sponsor. I know members of the council likely are well aware of why I've proposed this. Generally speaking, we've had this come up once or twice now at recent meetings where there's been a request for an abandonment and it's actually in the city's best interests, and there's been a hiccup when it comes to the language in the ordinance as applies to the fair market value issue. And it has come up again now more recently in my ward, where it has pretty much the same exact issue, and both the city and I are tired of seeing it, and this would resolve it nicely. And the language is pretty straightforward, speaks for itself, but I'll quickly summarize. It just allows, when the city is an applicant regarding the abandonment, that the mayor can certify that the abandonment serves the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the city, and then the city council, given the presence of such a certification, may waive some or all of the enumerated procedures listed here in the ordinance, or at least any of those that aren't required by state law. So fairly straightforward as written. Obviously, if there are any questions, fire away. Members of the committee? Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. I understand that there are a lot of circumstances where it might not seem entirely fair for the abutter to pay the assessed value. There are times where we would want to use our discretion to waive those fees. But as well-intentioned, and I would say this is a well-drafted ordinance, I do have hesitations here as to this proposed ordinance, amendment to the existing ordinance, because it opens the door for some unanticipated potential consequences. With the city, we observe a lot of procedures that cause inconvenience and sometimes unfairness in different situations. Usually, those situations tend to be the exception to the rule, and there's a reason why we have the general rule, even though the results of the harsh application of that general rule does not always seem to make sense in every single circumstance that might come up in front of this city council. So I certainly mean no offense, and I think that Councilman Sinapi put in good work on trying to draft this so that it's narrowly tailored and makes sense. However, just as by analogy, we wind up having some very strict protocols, having to follow very strict procedures when it comes to items like the city bidding process, which oftentimes don't yield us the best result compared to the relative ease that we might otherwise have if, as a city, somebody just did the shopping on Amazon for us and wound up paying a lower price than what the lowest bid might come in as, or otherwise pick up the phone, try to get a lower price than what the lowest bid may come in as. There are reasons why we have those incredibly inconvenient and sometimes seemingly ridiculous requirements, that red tape that we all get frustrated by. In a situation like this, when it comes to the abandonment of public land, I would be very cautious about anything that would provide for an exception to the general rule here, because if there is that type of exception, then even with that type of a certification, and even with a procedure where it still comes in front of the city council, it still opens up a certain door to the potential for political favoritism and the like, where there may be a certification that, okay, an abandonment that effectively gives away city land to private abutting landowners. And I'm certainly not saying anything about this city council or our current mayor, but keeping in mind that the ordinances are, unless otherwise amended, going to be on the books long after we all and long after the current mayor are no longer in their present positions. So with those considerations, I really wouldn't want to open up that type of loophole where, with a certification and some potential risk of favoritism when certain petitions come up in front of the city council for the standard to be applied unevenly and for some to wind up getting land transferred to them from the city at no charge, while others pay the fair market value. Thank you.
Any other members of the committee wish to speak? Any members of the council wish to speak? Councilman Lattiser.
I tend to concur with much of what Councilman Ricks just alluded to, and I certainly agree with his comments that city council changes and administration changes and the things that we do today or tomorrow have impacts. And we know certainly that in the upcoming year, there's going to be significant changes on this council. My first question is to our council solicitor. So, Solicitor Walsh, this proposed ordinance, does this proposed ordinance conflict with the state law regarding street abandonment? You know, as it's required in Rhode Island General Law 24-6-1. That's my first concern right now. Does this proposed?
No.
It does not.
No,
Okay.
and we are unable to waive anything required by the state anyway. Even if there is a nuance that's there, we are unable to waive a set requirement. 24-6-1 lays out the state requirements on what an order of abandonment requires, and this includes, for example, the posting of not a public highway in the specified locations. If you notice, those items are not part of what was the supplementary ordinance adopted by this council years ago. So the council has created these ordinances to supplement the state law. And so it's at the discretion of the council to decide if that is the appropriate standard or not, whether it requires revisions or not. But we cannot waive state law or contradict it.
Okay, thank you for that. I also have a concern with giving authority to any mayor to determine the fair market value of an abandonment on a property, as opposed to requiring professional evaluation or valuation of that property. I think that that could certainly have an impact on what the fair market value should be. That is certainly a concern. So this says in the final paragraph, the city council may waive these procedures on projects where the city is an applicant for an abandonment and the mayor certifies the abandonment serves the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens. So the question I have is, what dictates an abandonment? Is there a specific definition for this? This is to our council solicitor. That's part A of the question. And part B is this abandonment, as it states here, how does that compare to eminent domain? Or does it? Is there a correlation of each?
There is no corollary because eminent domain is effectively the reverse. That's taking of something. This is returning a portion of a paper street or an actual street or whatever is being sought, should it be determined, as we heard earlier in the evening, about whether it is useful or not. Those are the standards at the state level.
Okay. And the definition of abandonment, what dictates the abandonment? That the city council would waive these procedures on the project where the city is an applicant for an abandonment. What dictates the abandonment? How do you clarify that?
The city has, using both currently the state law and the city's ordinances, established a form effectively that should someone wish to petition the city for this relief, they pull the form and fill out the requirements that are a combination of the two, state law and general and the ordinances. And so what this situation that we're here and contemplating is in instances where the city says there's such a significant value that we are a applicant itself in its own or a co-applicant with any other abutters, that they would say that there is a public need in this sense. And we're saying that as a certification by some entity, in this case, the administration is certifying that this serves the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens, that if the administration, as part of applying for part of it, for this abandonment, and certifying that this standard exists, that we could provide the city council the flexibility as it relates to the city council's established ordinances. So it does not mean they all go away. It means the council may be, say, waive a payment piece, or it may waive a component. It does not require or give credence to it all going away. It could be that prerogative of the council should it be their wish, or, but these typically, the abandonments will go to the planning board. They are evaluated. They provide a recommendation as to what their feelings are as to educating the council as it relates to the planning board's responsible purview. And that what we're contemplating here is the possibility that they say, well, this would really serve the city's interest and there's a problem with this component, which we almost like a stipulation or a condition would be waiving of some component of the current ordinance.
So before the administration could act on a particular abandonment with whatever monetary amounts are assigned to that, that would have to come before the city council for either approval or denial.
Correct. The way this ordinance is drafted is to provide merely the option of the council, and it can come with or without the recommendation by the planning board, but certainly it's a factor that they can weigh in on. And certainly it does require the mayor to demonstrate the importance through this certification in order to get to the possibility of the council relieving a or any component of the current ordinances, but at no time waiving state requirements.
But ultimately, the final decision rests with the city council.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of the council wish to speak? Any members of the public wish to speak? Just make sure to state your name for the record, please.
Richard Langseth, Budlong Farm Road in Warwick. I was reviewing the proposed ordinance, and what I would suggest is that let me get my glasses on, G, that you enumerate what the items are. For instance, it says G, the city council may waive these procedures. What I would suggest is these procedures, they being A, B, C, D, and E, and F. And if you do that, what it does is it traps the legislation. It traps the statute, so that the only concern I have is F. And you really can't waive F because the statute says you must have F. Without the enumeration, one might say the procedures include procedures beyond A, B, C, D, E, and F. So that with that one little change, I think this does an adequate job. The bigger question, of course, is why would the city be an applicant for an abandonment? But I'll leave that to other people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you could just please state your name for the record.
Ann Sheridan, Shady Glen Drive. So my comment is, with the department maintaining a list of certified appraisers, it does point out in here that they have to be certified by the state. So if we're looking to maintain a list of, say, appraisers in the city of Warwick, then I think we should add it to this. Otherwise, I think an appraiser who is certified in the state should be available to offer an estimate evaluation. The other thing, to my way of thinking, is I think the whole concept of the city requesting fair market value in an abandonment is really ludicrous. In the case we have here today, you've got two people that are sharing a small piece of land. One woman who has owned it, they've both been abutters. One woman's been using it for parking a car. Obviously, she's been flagrantly using it over the years. And my recollection is that if you flagrantly use property for 10 or 11 years in a day or something, you can go to Superior Court and claim that. So I think in the case of these two people, if they had joined together and gone to Superior Court, they would have had a good option to get the property cleared and in their name. And we had the same instance, and I think it was Councilman Gebhardt was referring to at the last meeting, where a person's house was impeding on what was supposed to be the street, but yet we really weren't sure that the street was there because the street was written on a map and the city's maps. Well, now we're trying to use GIS to prove what's really there is just a reiteration of historic things that were drawn by somebody who may or may not in the past have been a certified surveyor that the city hired. I know in some assessing offices, there's always some person that marks up the maps as suggestions have been drawn, but when you go back to meets and bounds, I don't know too many people that can actually draw between one post in the middle, a nail in a tree, and onto the next nail in the next tree, and get the line correct. When you've got this person that built this, as of last week, is this person that built the thing was probably well aware of where the street was in relation to their house. So I object to what we did last meeting, and I object to this, and I object to the whole concept of the city looking for fair market value when you've got these little petitions. I think there's plenty of opportunity in the city where there's similar properties where if the city wasn't paying for it, people would come forward and try to take ownership of it, and you would end up getting the property tax on it sooner than later. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you can please state your name for the record.
Yes, good evening, Michelle Komar. I really appreciate all the comments and discussion here tonight, and I thank Councilman Ricks for his insight and the city solicitor for reviewing the state law, and for Councilman Lasser for bringing that to our attention. There is a state law, and there's one thing that the mayor is not exempt from, according to state law. No one is. And this is lacking testimony before the planning board when it dealt with RIAC and the street abandonments they're looking for, and will approach the council for construction of the berm, the noise berm, which is needed for the freight cargo facility. Now, in this case, this is a large area abandonment of streets. It's not just small, which they have some relevance at times. So what's missing that the mayor is not exempt from, or any applicant, is that whenever by judgment of the town council of any town, a highway or driftway in the town or any part of either has ceased to be useful to the public. And that's the first sentence in the state legislation, State Act 24-6-1. And that's failing to be established at the planning board level, at least for the RIAC project. And the city, and they're just leaving it to the city council to take care of. Are people using that as a city park? Are they using the public land in any way? And solicitor, you tipped me off when you said co-applicant. We certainly don't want the city as a co-applicant to a state project where the beneficial use has not been determined to cease. The beneficial use to the public has not been determined to be gone, lost, not in use. And I don't think the city is exempt from establishing that, because that's in state law. The other thing is, I don't see in state law where a city or town can be the applicant. The city owns the paper street, and the two abutters get to own part of the property if abandoned. It doesn't go to the city, or the city should decide they should waive fees. This is set in state law. Its fair market value goes to the abutting landowners. There's no waiving of that procedure. So I think that in terms of projects big or small, they need to follow the state law. And I don't see where the city could be an applicant or a co-applicant unless they have a paper street running through a city park and the city owns both sides of the paper street, that abut both sides of the paper street. Otherwise, somebody else owns them, whether they be state property, a private citizen. The city can't own the property, can't absorb the abandonment if they don't own the property, and therefore they can't be the applicant. And that's what this waiver is for, when the city is the applicant. I don't see how, Councilman Sinapi alluded to some examples that were problematic he's trying to solve. I just don't see this state law exempting the city as an applicant or co-applicant. They have to follow the law. And it needs to be established, and the city needs to establish that the beneficial use to the project has ceased, even though the city thinks another public project would benefit. It's the existing public beneficial use. And some small projects, paper streets, are served as mini parks for people because they haven't been developed, of course, and there's trees, there's green space, and people use them. They're mini parks. And I wouldn't want that to disappear because the city hasn't determined that all beneficial public use has ceased. And they're going to determine that they're the applicant and can do whatever they want and swap one public benefit use for another one that the city thinks has greater public benefit. So I caution you about making special exceptions for the city. It's the abutters that own property are the ones that are to benefit from the split of the abandonment, half to each abutting property. So I'll stop there, and I just caution the council from adopting this ordinance as written. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak? All right, seeing none. Rather than amend here, I prefer to amend on the floor because otherwise things get duplicative. So before I move for a favorable recommendation, I'm going to note that I am going to speak during the break with the solicitor about enumerating the procedures in question as suggested by Mr. Langseth, because that would also, it would kind of a two-pronged approach because it would also address some of what Ms. Kumar just mentioned, make it clearer that this is only applying to waiving these procedures, and we can't waive state law. There's no possible, even if we wrote here, we waive all state laws, it wouldn't matter. It means nothing. We can't do that. It's just not possible. And just for everyone's own edification, the purpose of this honestly isn't actually to benefit the city. It's to benefit, in my case, constituents, but also members of the public, landowners, et cetera, because that's who's getting actually hurt by this, not the city, because they're forced to tell these landowners, or in my ward's case, who's trying to actually help the city by turning over land that the city needs, and that will actually also help the constituent, that, oh, by the way, resident who's helping us, you need to pay potentially thousands of dollars for your efforts to help us, which is obviously silly, frankly. That just doesn't make sense from a cost-benefit analysis for anyone, frankly. I do understand the point, though, that it's a dual-edged sword where it can be potentially abused. However, the checks and balances on here, it would require 9 council people, or at least a majority, plus the mayor, to all be on board with such a reckless course of action, which is not really a reasonable thing to countenance, considering everything about this structure of government relies on that not happening. So let's not pretend like this is special in that regard. So I move favorable recommendation as written, although, as mentioned, I plan on amending on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Let's say that hurts. All right, motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes favorable action. So it'll go to the full council, and ordinance finishes at, my laptop died, 8:21 p.m.
Thank you, Chairman Sinapi. We have one more public safety this evening. There's one claim.
Good evening. The Public Safety Committee is called to order at 8:22. We have a momentary pause. I'm waiting for Councilman Sinapi. All I have is this. Yeah, I got all right, so we don't hold. So I can okay. All right. Again, thank you. We have one item, PCR 56-24, resolution relative to the payment of a claim to Damon Oppen. I'm requesting a hold till the meeting in July so I can do a little investigation. I guess there was a payment sent to the claimant, but it was erroneous, and I'm just going to track down the history up. So I'm looking to hold till July. Yes, sir.
So there might have some information. It's in the resolution itself.
I'm sorry, sir. I can't hear you.
I was just curious if there was a particular question. The resolution spells out many of the facts that got us to this juncture, but I'm happy to elaborate if it needs further clarification.
I'm personally asking to hold for 1 month so I can look at it.
Okay.
Give a little further.
Just happy to answer questions if need be.
I
But
appreciate that. But we'll talk between now and the next meeting. Thank you, Solicitor. So what's the date on the July meeting?
15th.
15th. So hold to 7:15. Do I have a motion? Do I need one?
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is ended at 8:25. Thank you. Thank you for lending that.
Good evening again. We are back now in the full council meeting. So if you're following the agenda here, we've already done roll call, we've done general communications, we've done executive communications, and we've done public comment. So now we're moving on to number 1 this evening, which is the consent calendar. First up is PCR 59-24, Committee Report Finance.
Favorable action.
For action, Councilman Howe.
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley. Go ahead, Councilman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bid 2025-046, bid 2025-041, bid 2025-047, bid 2025-035, 2024-068, 2024-370, 2023-171, 2024-495, 2024-496, 2024-492, 2025-060, 2025-058, 2025-057, 2024-015, 2024-497, 2024-493, 2025-019, 2024-451.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any questions or comments that were not asked earlier this evening in the Finance Committee? Okay, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action on the consent calendar.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Yes. Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, consent passes.
Thank you. Consent calendar passage. Councilman Howe, I believe 4 items have been removed from the consent calendar.
Yes, Mr. President. Formerly bid 2025-059 is now PCR 60-24. Purchase of one Chevy Silverado 3500 with plow package. That left committee favorable action.
Okay, so for action, Councilman Howe.
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley. Any questions or comments? Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be voting no on this item, and it's not because I don't feel we need the vehicle. It's because I don't feel that there is enough research, if you will, on some of these items before we send them up here. This isn't monopoly money we're talking about. This is taxpayer dollars that we're talking about. And I did make an inquiry on that vehicle with those items that were listed. And there is better deals out there. And we heard testimony that no one is making calls to find out if there's a better deal. Didn't even make a call to other vendors on the MPA to see if they had a better price, but yet just submitted this to us without doing that research to see if we could save some taxpayer dollars. So for that reason, I'm going to be voting no on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other additional questions or comments on this item? Okay, hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
No.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
No.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 7 yes, 2 no, motion passes.
Thank you. Motion passes. The second item, Councilman Howe.
Mr. President, bid 2025-040 citywide street striping is now PCR 61-24. Favorable action with amendment.
Okay, Councilman Howe.
Move favorable action with amendment.
And the amendment is?
The amendment is to deduct or reduce the request of an amount of $45,000, so the bid goes from $80,000 to $35,000.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there a second? A second by Councilman Foley. Okay, any additional questions where you're reducing this amount from $80,000 to $35,000? Any questions on the amendment? Hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action on the amendment.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt? Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes to amend.
Thank you. Councilman Howe, would you like to move favorable as amended?
Move PCR 61-24 favorable as amended.
Second by Councilman Foley and Councilwoman Travis and Councilman Gephardt. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action as amended.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt? Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, motion passes as amended.
Thank you. Motion passes as amended. Third item, Councilman Howe.
Yes, Mr. President, formerly bid 2025-047 vehicle body repair and painting. That was now PCR 62-24. Favorable action with an amendment.
Okay, and Councilman Howe, the amendment?
The amendment was to add $35,000 from account 30-330 to make the overall bid for $100,000. That was move favorable action with amendment.
Okay, is there a second? Councilman Foley? Okay, so Solicitor Walsh.
And the amendment also includes clarifying that the original $65,000 is coming from code 76358.
Correct.
Thank you.
So the full amendment is the amending the amount, and then the $65,000 is from code 76358, and the $35,000 is going to become from the code 30-330. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll on the amendment.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis.
Yes.
9 yes to amend.
Thank you. Councilman Howe, would you like to move that favorable as amended?
Move PCR 62-24 as amended.
Second by Councilman Foley. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action as amended.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, motion passes as amended.
Thank you. Motion passes as amended. The fourth item, Councilman Howe.
One moment. Okay. Formerly bid 2025-044 is now PCR 63-20. Favorable action from the committee.
For action, Councilman Howe.
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley and Councilman Lattiser. Any questions or comments? I believe we're going to have one recusal on this. Okay. Hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 recusal, motion passes.
Thank you. Motion passes. And that completes the consent calendar and the PCRs. Next up on the item on the agenda is referred business. We've already voted on this PCO 6-24 that was moved favorable action. So now we will move to unfinished business on the agenda this evening. First up is PCR 131-23 committee report, public properties.
Move favorable action, or pardon me, recommend favorable action.
I believe this is the recommendation was to move to the pending file.
Oh, pardon me. Pardon that mix-up. Recommendation, move to the pending file.
Okay, I'll take that as a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Councilman Foley, Councilwoman Travis, Councilman Lattiser, Councilman Gephardt. We'll do a voice vote on this. All those in favor of moving to a pending file, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? PCR 131-23 is moved to the pending file. Number 2 this evening is PCR 55-24, committee report, finance.
Favorable action.
For action, Councilman Howe.
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley. Any questions or comments that were not asked earlier this evening in the Finance Committee? I believe we discussed this for about an hour plus. Hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, motion passes.
Thank you. Motion passes. We're now moving to new business this evening. First up is PCO 5-24 committee report, ordinance.
The committee recommended favorable action.
For action, Councilman Sinapi.
So I want to say move favorable action, but I also want to make an amendment.
Sure. So,
First one, then the other?
yes.
So move favorable action.
Do we have a second? Second by Councilwoman Travis. Councilman Sinapi.
So I'd like to make an amendment, and I believe the solicitor has it.
Solicitor Walsh.
Councilman Sinapi moves to amend the new language proposed in subsection G to delete the word "these" and insert the language in place thereof, any of the, and following the word procedures, inserting the language laid out above in subparts A through E. So the new sentence would read, G, the city council may waive any of the procedures laid out above in subparts A through E. And then continuing on as originally written.
Okay, so you're making that motion as your amendment, Councilman Sinapi?
Yes, please.
Do we have a second to that? Second by Councilman Ricks. Any questions, or Councilwoman Travis? Any questions or comments on the amendment? Okay, hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action on the amendment.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes to amend.
Thank you. Councilman Sinapi.
So I move favorable action as amended.
Councilman has moved favorable as amended. Councilwoman Travis is second. Any other second? Second by Councilman McElroy. Any questions or comments? Councilman Ricks.
To briefly address a couple of points raised by Ann Sheridan during her public comment. Adverse possession would not be relevant here, as adverse possession does not affect city property or property owned by the state. I would also state that I think it is very fair for the applicant to pay the fair market value. Fair market value is in the name of the term. The applicant is the one who would tend to select their own appraiser. And one could even have concerns about an applicant shopping around for a favorable appraiser, but that is already part of the current ordinance, and I'm not suggesting that we change that, as obviously if an applicant were to get an appraisal that's patently unfair, then we as a city council or the administration would be able to raise a red flag on that. So I think that the current ordinance is very well balanced. I have a concern that just as we have many processes here at the city council, some of which are simply a matter of state law that we are required to conform with. And of course, I'm not saying that this amendment would not conform with the state law, certainly not. But similar principles do apply here. It's not a situation where the city council, for example, or the administration, or even both together, are able to waive, for example, the bid processes, even if it would actually give the city a better deal. In that situation, we're bound by state law. But even if we weren't, I would suggest that it would be a bad idea to go down that track, because for every time that it would actually make sense for us to do that, and it is in everyone's interests, it just opens up that door that if the exception exists, then there is the danger that it might be abused at some point in the future. I would hope that it wouldn't be abused, but there is that risk. And then there is also the matter of a perception of a favoritism. I'm not suggesting that we should bind ourselves and be ruled by not just a matter of making sure that there is not, in fact, favoritism. That's really the standard that we have to go by. We have to make sure that we are not being partial to one side or the other in these situations, but we are all elected officials, and I think it is important for us to at least keep in mind that public perception is also important. So because it would create an exception in the standard process that we've used for all of these many decades, and open the door to, if not favoritism, then the danger of favoritism and the public perception of favoritism. As much as I understand the rationale here, and I think that it is very much well-intentioned, it's simply not something that I can support opening this door. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other additional questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, the clerk will call roll for favorable action as amended. Yes.
Mr. Foley? Yes. Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
No.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
No.
Mr. Sinapi? Yes. Ms. Travis?
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no, motion passes.
Thank you. Motion passes as amended. Number 4 this evening is PCR 56-24 Committee Report, Public Safety. Hold till July 15th. Number 5 this evening is PCR 57-24 Committee Report, Public Properties.
Recommend favorable action.
For action, Councilman Ricks.
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley and Councilman Lattiser. Any questions or comments that were not asked earlier this evening in committee? Hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt? Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, motion passes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Number 6 this evening is PCR 58-24, Committee Report Finance.
Favorable action.
For action, Councilwoman Travis, could you move this for me?
I move favorable action on PCR-58-24.
Thank you. Second by Councilman Lattiser. Councilman Howe. Any questions or comments? And I missed one earlier in my comments during finance. We're also going to put one on Long Street by the church. Hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Yes. Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, motion passes.
Thank you. Motion passes. We're now moving to unanimous consent. Ward 1, anything to docket under unanimous consent. Ward 2.
Pass.
Ward 3.
Pass.
Ward 4.
Pass.
Ward 5. Ward 6.
Pass.
Ward 7 passes. Ward 8. Ward 9. Councilwoman Travis.
If there be no further business of this honorable body, I move to a docket session.
All those in favor of moving the docket session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now in the docket session. Ward 1, anything to docket this evening. Ward 2.
Pass.
Ward 3.
Pass.
Ward 4.
Pass.
Ward 5. Ward 6. Ward 7 passes. Ward 8. Ward 9.
An ordinance in regards to no parking this side only to be placed on the north side of Major Potter Road from the intersection of Quaker Lane extending eastbound to Spencer Woods Drive.
Ordinance Committee. And thank you very much. We are adjourned. We'll see you in July.